Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. Stephanie Flores Ramirez was born on July 22, 1988, to Ricardo Flores and Maria Elena Ramirez. She was a kind and easygoing child. Her family was quite wealthy. Her father was involved in the auto racing industry and was building a successful political career. Stephanie grew up in a prestigious family. Her four brothers were all from the upper class and had access to the best education. Stephanie excelled in school, earning the admiration and respect of her teachers and classmates. In 2008, at the age of 20, Stephanie enrolled at the University of San Martin de Porres to study business administration. By 2010, as a third-year student, she had many great ideas and hopes for her future. Despite her innocent appearance and excellent academic performance, Stephanie knew how to enjoy life. With a lot of money at her disposal, she frequented the best nightclubs and casinos in the country. On the night of May 30, 2010, at a casino called Atlantic City, Stephanie met a mysterious man named Joran van der Sloot at around 3 a.m. She sat down at the poker table next to him, and they were instantly attracted to each other, although they came from different countries. They both spoke fluent English and quickly found common ground. Stephanie was drawn to Joran's confidence and easygoing demeanor, while he was captivated by her beauty and smile. During their conversation, Stephanie asked Joran how he came to Lima. He said he was on vacation to escape some personal troubles. At that time, Stephanie had no idea that his troubles were related to the murder of a woman. Joran deceived her by claiming that he was the son of a wealthy lawyer and judge. This made Stephanie feel safe, as she believed that someone from a wealthy family like hers could not be dangerous. They talked at the poker table late into the night. Stephanie was an experienced gambler, knowing how to assess odds and calculate how to win money. Just a few days earlier, she had won $1 in a game after hours of chatting. They had consumed a considerable amount of alcohol. What started as a casual conversation gradually turned into flirting. Eventually, Joran invited Stephanie to spend the night with him, and to her surprise, she agreed. They went to a hotel in the Miraflores area, where Joran rented a room. There are differing accounts of whether the pair became intimate. Some say they had an intimate encounter, while others claim that Stephanie simply went to his room to continue playing online poker. The details of that night are somewhat unclear, however. It is confirmed that at some point, Stephanie accessed Joran's laptop. Stephanie later learned of Joran's connection to Natalie Holloway's death. She had been lured into a dangerous situation, and now she was trapped with a criminal. Stephanie tried to escape, but was unable to. When Joran realized she had discovered his secret, he became furious. A struggle ensued. He hit Stephanie in the nose with a crowbar, causing her to bleed mercilessly. Joran overpowered her and began strangling her. He then continued to attack her until she stopped breathing. When morning came, Stephanie still hadn't returned home. Her father, Ricardo, grew increasingly worried as time passed. He knew his daughter always came home, which made him fear that something was wrong. He contacted his son, Enrique, for help in finding Stephanie. They called Stephanie's co-workers, but when they found nothing, they contacted the police to report her missing. Ricardo discovered that his daughter had been gambling the night before. Peruvian police then went to Atlantic City to investigate further. There, they reviewed surveillance camera footage of Stephanie playing poker and drinking. During the night, she met a tall young man. The police quickly identified him and obtained his national identification number. From that point on, Joran van der Sloot became the prime suspect in Stephanie's disappearance. It was discovered that the two had left the casino together around 5 a.m. that morning, although their exact destination was initially unclear. It was noted that they were returning to the hotel where Joran was staying. The footage showed the pair entering his hotel room. Hours later, Joran left the room alone, but returned with 2 cups of coffee and a loaf of bread. 3 hours after they entered, Joran left the room again, still alone. As he left, He informed a hotel employee that Stephanie was still in the room, but asked that she not be disturbed as she was only sleeping. On June 2, 3 days after Stephanie's death, and after Joran had checked out, a hotel employee discovered her body in room 309. Police found a tennis racket in the room, believed to be the weapon used in the attack. After verifying the name associated with the room, police confirmed that it was Joran van der Sloot. After leaving the hotel, he left the TV on full volume, possibly creating the illusion that someone was still inside. Police were unable to determine where he went after the crime. In an effort to quickly identify Joran, the police released his information and photo to all media outlets. In further investigation, police learned that Joran van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, into a wealthy family. He has 2 older brothers, his mother is an art teacher, and his father has a well-paying job that provides for the family. They live a comfortable life. Enjoying traveling, Joran attends a local international school, where he is a diligent student. He is tall, attractive, and athletic, participating in football and tennis while regularly practicing with his father. Despite doing well in school, Joran was a spoiled brat and a habitual liar. In contrast to his calm older brothers, he displayed arrogant and flamboyant behavior, often sneaking out at night to go to casinos. In 2005, he met an American girl named Natalie Holloway. As their relationship developed, Joran expressed a desire to be intimate with her. When Natalie refused, he became violent and kicked her in the head when she was unconscious. He abused her to cover up his crime. He murdered her. The case of Natalie's disappearance and Joran's involvement attracted international media attention. Maintaining public interest for a decade, Joran was the prime suspect from the beginning. But due to numerous legal issues, he could not be convicted despite repeated interrogations and detentions. How did Joran get to Lima? And where did he get the money for the trip? In fact, he blackmailed Natalie's family, promising to reveal the location of their daughter's body in exchange for cash. After receiving a portion of the money, Joran fled to Lima to pursue his gambling ventures there. At a casino in Atlantic City, he met his second victim, Stephanie, whom he killed on the 5th anniversary of Natalie's death. Joran became the prime suspect in the case, leading to his placement on Interpol's wanted list. Police in neighboring countries were informed of the situation. His whereabouts were soon traced. When he entered Chile via the Chacaluta border, police confirmed that he was in Chile. After tracing him, he was later found after taking a taxi in Vina del Mar, a coastal city. Chilean police arrested him as he was walking toward Santiago. Joran was immediately taken into custody, and the bloodied clothing of the victim, Stephanie, was found in his possession. Initially, Joran denied any involvement in her death, claiming that armed robbers had attacked them in their hotel room. He alleged that when Stephanie refused to cooperate, they killed her. This explanation was seen as an attempt to evade responsibility. On July 5, after Joran was deported to Peru, an official investigation began. He was questioned, and after several days of police interrogation, he realized he had no way out and confessed to the crime. In his written statement, he detailed the events that took place that night. He claimed that he had left the hotel to buy coffee and bread, but when he returned, he discovered that Stephanie was using his computer and that she knew he was involved in Natalie's death. According to Joran, when he tried to explain with Stephanie, she hit him and ran toward the door. He then stopped her. He insisted that he never intended to kill her. However, when she invaded his privacy without permission, he became angry, lost control, and ultimately took Stephanie's life. Joran claimed that he drank coffee laced with an illegal pill, then packed his things and left the hotel. Subsequent toxicology tests showed no trace of any pills in his system, suggesting that he may have used this strategy to reduce his sentence in Peru. Crimes committed under the influence of illegal substances often result in lighter sentences, and it appears that Joran's attorneys were aware of this and sought to exploit it, Joran was subsequently arrested on charges of robbery and first-degree murder. Given the severity of Joran's actions and the wealth of his family, the judge denied his request for bail on the morning of the trial. An angry crowd gathered outside the courthouse, expressing their outrage by throwing fruit and eggs at Joran as he was escorted inside. Joran had previously been held in a maximum security prison in South America, known for its harsh conditions. Where he was constantly monitored, he was offered a chance to be transferred to a prison in Aruba if he revealed the location of Natalie's body. But he refused the offer. Joran's attorneys have argued that Joran lost control during the attack on Stephanie because she took his laptop without permission. If the judge had accepted this argument, Joran could have faced a lighter sentence of only 3 to 5 years in prison, and with good behavior, he might have been released after 20 months. However, these efforts have failed. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to the murder and robbery of Stephanie Flores Ramirez. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison and ordered to pay $75 to Stephanie's family. This marked the end of Stephanie's case. However, Joran's criminal story is not over yet. He was recently extradited to the United States to face charges of extorting Natalie's parents. Concerned that his sentence could be longer than life, he decided to plead guilty. Natalie Holloway's case took a turn when Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to extortion and wire fraud. The plea added 20 years to his sentence, which he would have to serve after his release from a Peruvian prison. Although Joran confessed to killing Natalie, he was not punished for that crime. Instead, he was sentenced to a total of 28 years in a Peruvian prison. After serving his sentence, he was transferred to a U.S. prison to serve an additional 20 years for extorting Natalie's family. During this time, little was known about what happened. Notably, Joran's father, who had supported him, died of a heart attack. Although Joran faced a total of 48 years in prison, many felt that this punishment was insufficient given his cruelty. Stephanie and Natalie lived short but vibrant lives, filled with love and the promise of a bright future. Their families and friends are devastated by the loss of their beautiful daughters, sisters, and girlfriends. It is heartbreaking to know that their lives were taken by a criminal with no compassion. If Joran had been incarcerated sooner, with enough evidence against him, Stephanie might still be alive today. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Cawley. Her parents divorced, and her mother remarried Bruce Jamon. Kendra had 3 sisters, Jamie Kalman, Ashley Lipham, and Melissa Jameson, and 1 brother, Neil Hatcher. She grew up in Pleasant Plains and pursued her studies in dentistry there. Following her divorce in 2010, she relocated to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone Dental Studio. Kendra, who had a strong Christian faith, aimed to use her dental skills to help others. The clinic, for instance, offered free services to disadvantaged children. In her free time, Kendra taught Bible studies and took part in volunteer programs, which involved building churches abroad and offering free dental care to children in Ecuador. Her career quickly took off, and her personal life thrived. On May 24, 2015, Kendra started dating Dr. Ricardo Paniagua. They met through a dating app, and from their first date, they became inseparable. Both shared similar values and interests and wanted the same things in life. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having been in a relationship for just a few months, he and his girlfriend were already talking about getting married. Unfortunately, a tragic incident in a parking lot claimed her life, ending all their future plans. Investigators who arrived at the massacre site assessed the crime scene and initially suggested a robbery, as Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. Beside her body, they discovered bullet fragments and a gun magazine. However, evidence from the shooting shifted the focus away from robbery. Kendra was shot twice. One bullet hit her back and another struck her head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, exciton G through the chin, suggesting that Kendra had her hands raised behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was confirmed after the police obtaining CCTV footage, which helped reconstruct the events. The footage shows a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. Half an hour later, Kendra arrives home and parks in the same garage. A few minutes later, a man comes up to her, shoots her, and runs to the side, then jumps into the moving black Jeep. The videos were of poor quality and the crime scene couldn't be seen in them. The attackers couldn't be identified, but the vehicle was put on the wanted list. It was decided to release the images of the Jeep and the driver captured by the cameras to the media. The authorities asked the public for help, and that turned out to be effective. A man named Jose Luis Ortiz got in touch with the police. He reported that the car in the images was his, but made it clear that he wasn't involved in the shooting and wasn't drive. The vehicle. When questioned, Jose explained that on the morning of September 2nd, two of his friends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, asked him to fix their car and requested to borrow his Jeep until the evening. Jose agreed. He mentioned that later that evening, Brenda called Jose to a restaurant. That same evening, Crystal drove the Jeep come back to Jose's house. Therefore, the man was quite surprised when he saw his Jeep in the news. When Jose saw his Jeep on a TV show, he asked Brenda about it. At first, she said it was a different Jeep on the screen. Then, Brenda mentioned that Crystal had been traveling for work, and she didn't know anything about it. Brenda advised Jose not to tell anyone and just repaint the Jeep. Brenda agreed to pay for the Jeep to be painted. Meanwhile, Jose was waiting for a decision on his U.S. citizenship and wanted to avoid any issues with the police. He understood that Brenda had tricked him, so he went back to the police department to testify. He police monitored all the Jeep's movements that day and identified the two young women whom Jose had mentioned. Brenda Delgado was the first person investigators questioned. She claimed she didn't know Kendra and had never seen her before. When asked about her whereabouts on September 2nd at 7:42 p.m., Brenda provided an alibi, stating that she was at a restaurant with Jose and even presented receipts for the dinner. This raised questions about why someone would keep dinner receipts for so long. Eventually, with detailed investigation, the concealed truth behind the crime was uncovered. The central figure in the investigation was Brenda. She was born into a modest family, Luis and Maria Alado, who immigrated to Dallas from Mexico. Her father worked in a factory. They settled in a low-income neighborhood in southeast Dallas, where Luis found a job in construction, and Maria worked at the U.S. Post Office and cleaned houses. Brenda was their second child and only daughter. She was an excellent student, well-liked by her teachers, and worked part-time at a flower shop and as a waitress. Brenda was very ambitious and dreamed of attending medical school, but unfortunately, her parents couldn't afford the high tuition fees. After graduating from Skyline High School in 2000, she continued to live with her parents while dreaming of a prosperous and beautiful life. To achieve her goals, Brenda worked diligently. She was employed as a dental assistant and also worked at a department in North Park Center. In 2012, Brenda met Ricardo Paniagua and fell in love with him. Their first date, a dream come true for her, was at a Jennifer Lopez concert. In November 2012, just 3 months after meeting, Brenda moved in with Ricardo at his home in Fitzhugh Urban Flats. Ricardo was equally captivated by Brenda and even made an effort to meet her parents. In 2013, she posted on Facebook for his birthday. Brenda later found out she was pregnant, but at Ricardo's urging, she ended the Nancy, which left her heartbroken. A bit recovered from the decision, Brenda decided to focus on her career and her beloved Ricardo. In the fall of that year, she started attending Sanford. Initially, it appeared that Brenda had moved past the emotional impact of the breakup, but this wasn't true. Her reliance on Ricardo intensified. When Ricardo shared a photo online with his new partner Kendra, who resembled a model, Brenda might feel jealous. Investigators, after gathering details about Brenda and her life, concluded that she had a motive to remove her rival. Ricardo confirmed that Brenda was his ex-girlfriend. They had an on and off relationship from 2012 to 2015, the relationship ending a few months before Ricardo met Kendra. Ricardo believed that he and Brenda remained friends and didn't see any issues between Brenda and Kendra. After all, he had dated other women before meeting Kendra, so why would meeting her affect Brenda? Brenda believed she had come up with the perfect plan to win back her ex-boyfriend and eliminate Kendra from his life. She started by offering him support and showed interest in his relationship with Kendra. In reality, she was aware of all their future plans, and Ricardo mistakenly thought her interest was genuine. Unfortunately, men often misunderstand women and sometimes trust them blindly. Brenda had been plotting her own plan for months. She had opened Ricardo's mail and knew all his plans with Kendra, even when and where they had booked tickets. All of this was infuriating to Brenda. She wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher, sincerely believing that she had taken Kendra's place. Brenda transferred Ricardo's account to her phone to monitor him closely. Following Ricardo and Kendra became her main focus in life. She became obsessed with stalking them, eventually quitting her job to dedicate all her time to this pursuit. Over time, Brenda developed a sinister plan to kill Kendra, whom she despised. To carry out this plan, Brenda approached several acquaintances, offering them money to harm Kendra. A mutual acquaintance introduced her to Crystal Cortez, a 21-year-old single mother facing severe financial difficulties. For just $500, Crystal agreed to help her. Following Brenda's instructions, Crystal contacted Christopher Love, who agreed to carry out the crime. Crystal gave Christopher $500 from Brenda along with 2 types of illegal substances. Kendra was being followed by 2 women who wanted to learn her habits and daily schedule to choose the best time and place for their crime. On September 2, 2015, they used Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher waited for Kendra in the parking lot. They didn't follow her home from work because they were worried about getting stuck in traffic. That evening, they successfully carried out their plan. A few days after the crime, Crystal and Christopher were arrested. The suspects denied their guilt and being at the crime scene. However, things changed when Christopher was ND with the gun that killed Kendra in the side compartment of the car. Crystal, on the other hand, was nervous and constantly confused in her testimony, giving different testimony about why the SUV appeared in various parts of the city. In the initial questioning, Crystal confessed to being the driver in the parking lot. However, she insisted that she was forced there by an armed carjacker who had entered her SUV and made her drive. Trying to appear innocent, she falsely stated that her son was with her in the car. This claim was later disproved as security cameras did not show any child present. During the interrogation, as more evidence emerged, Crystal altered her testimony and sought to negotiate with the investigators. She agreed to testify against Brenda in exchange for a reduced sentence. Crystal informed the police that Brenda wanted Kendra dead and that the crime was Brenda's idea. Crystal stated that within 2 weeks of meeting Brenda, they started planning the crime. The police found out that Brenda wasn't just sad because her relationship with Ricardo had ended, she was obsessed and desperate to win him back. She pretended to be happy about being his loyal friend, but her life started falling apart. She began to resent Kendra, believing she had taken her place. According to Crystal, it was at this moment that Brenda decided she wanted to get rid of Kendra Hatcher. That's when a plan to commit the perfect crime hatched in Brenda Delgado's mind. During her testimony, Crystal explained how Brenda came up with the perfect crime and enlisted her help. Together, Brenda and Crystal started planning to kill Kendra. They met several times and came up with various plans. The initial idea was to inject Kendra with illegal drugs or sedatives and then dispose of her. Brenda knew she needed a trustworthy accomplice to avoid suspicion, so she began the search. They drove through the rundown neighborhoods and asked several people for assistance. This is how they met Christ Ofer. He agreed to help and played a significant role in planning the details of the crime. The three of them decided together that the quickest way to kill her was to shoot her. During their collaboration, Crystal disclosed that September 2nd was intentionally selected. Brenda was aware that Kendra and Ricardo were planning a trip to Mexico, so they decided to eliminate her before the vacation. Brenda told Crystal she wanted the crime to appear as a failed robbery. Next, the criminals then selected the location for the murder. For days, they meticulously followed Kendra's movements, recording her every minute to ensure nothing altered for the chosen day. After her work hours, they tracked her path home and planned how to subtly access the apartment complex's secure parking garage. On September 1, 2015, they conducted a final check. On the morning of the crime, Brenda and Crystal picked up the Jeep from Jose and then picked up Christopher. Brenda was dropped off at the library in Caro Wilton to create an alibi, while Crystal and Christopher headed to Kendra's apartment complex. They waited across the street for about 30 minutes before driving to Kendra's workplace. After failing to follow her due to traffic, they went back to the house to wait. When Kendra arrived home, Christopher, wearing gloves, got out of the car, approached her with a gun, and shot her as she exited her vehicle. Crystal mentioned that she didn't witness the shooting but heard it. After that, she drove Christopher home, picked up her son from his grandmother, and later met Brenda at Jose's house to give him the Jeep. As a result, Brenda's dream was fulfilled. She was free from her despised rival and only needed to wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda felt delighted that she had executed the perfect crime. Crystal's honest confession and testimony against Brenda clearly proved Brenda's guilt, leading to a swift issuance of an arrest warrant. However, when police went to arrest her, Brenda was not at home. As a dual citizen, she escaped to Mexico. Following her escape, her role in arranging a contract killing was revealed, and she was added to the wanted list. On April 6, 2016, the FBI added Brenda to their list of most wanted fugitives, offering a $100,000 reward for information leading to her capture. She was the only woman on the list at that time and the 9th woman ever to be included. Just 2 days later, Mexican authorities arrested her in Torreon, Coahuila. She was extradited to the United States on October 6, under the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Once in the U.S., she was charged with capital murder in Texas, and her trial began in 2017. During the court hearing, the families of Kendra and Ricardo openly shared their feelings. Witnesses verified Brenda's harmful obsession with her ex-lover and her intentions. In court, Brenda's cousin Moses Martinez discussed his sister's depression following her breakup with Ricardo. He also disclosed that Brenda had offered him money to attack Kendra with a baseball bat, a proposal he declined. At the trial, Jennifer Escobar, Brenda's friend, testified that Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo. She recounted that Brenda would read all his emails and track his movements through his phone. Jennifer informed the jury that Brenda had a copy of his house key and access to his bank accounts. She also revealed that Brenda asked for her help to get rid of the hated Kendra, suggesting methods like injecting something lethal or using a bat to put her in a coma. Brenda offered Jennifer $2,000, a car, and illegal drugs in exchange for her help. Jennifer talked about this offer with her parents and decided to refuse it. It's odd that, when presented with the suggestion to harm or kill someone, but no one reported this threat to the police. Brenda's obsession was highlighted through evidence presented by several associates in court. It was found that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead, seeing H. or as a barrier to reuniting with Ricardo. Evidence revealed that Brenda's obsession grew significantly in the months before Kendra's death. During the hearing, an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500 was presented, which Brenda gave to Crystal as payment for her involvement. Christopher received a cash payment of $600. Cell phone records showed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime. Moreover, there were over 99 calls recorded between Brenda and Crystal from August 22 to September 4, demonstrating their constant communication to plan the murder of Kendra. The defendant's attorney attempted to place most of the blame on the actual perpetrators, but this strategy was unsuccessful. The defense claimed that Brenda was not present at the crime scene, offering an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant when the crime occurred. Although Brenda did not plead guilty, the jury disagreed with her defense. Brenda was found guilty of murdering Kendra, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after just 30 minutes of deliberation. Christopher, who directly committed the murder, admitted his guilt and was sentenced to death. Crystal cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, which resulted in her receiving a 35-year prison sentence with the possibility of parole. Kendra Hatcher's family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom after the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family never believed Brenda could be involved, as they knew her as a loving daughter and a woman with solid family values and Christian principles. In conclusion, the tragic case of Kendra Hatcher underscores the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy and obsession. Brenda Delgado's relentless pursuit to reclaim her past love led to a senseless crime that ended a life full of promise. The investigation revealed the intricate and disturbing lengths to which Brenda went to orchestrate Kendra's murder, revealing a dark side that was hidden beneath a facade of normalcy. The verdict delivered justice for Kendra and her family, but it also serves as a stark reminder of the profound impact that personal vendettas can have when they spiral out of control. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sylvia Likens. Sylvia Likens was born on January 3, 1949, in Lebanon, Indiana, to carnival workers Lester and Betty Likens. She was the third of 5 children, and her childhood was marked by frequent moves and financial hardship. Sylvia's siblings included 2 sets of twins, older twins Daniel and Diana, and younger twins Benny and Jenny. Jenny suffered from polio, which left her with a limp and weak legs, requiring her to wear a steel brace for support. Due to her parents' unstable marriage and nomadic lifestyle, Sylvia and Jenny often stayed with their grandmother, providing a safer and more stable environment. This arrangement allowed the girls to maintain a steady education despite the family's frequent travels. Sylvia began taking on responsibilities at a young age. She babysat, ran errands for neighbors and friends, and helped with household chores such as ironing. This allowed her to earn some money to buy things she wanted, and she often shared the money with her mother. Those who knew Sylvia described her as a friendly, confident, and charming girl with long, wavy, light brown hair that fell to her shoulders. Her friends affectionately called her Cookie. However, despite her outgoing personality, Sylvia was self-conscious about her smile because she had lost a front tooth due to a childhood accident while playing with one of her brothers. Sylvia often took Jenny to the local skating rink, where she would help her skate by holding her hand. In June 1965, Sylvia and Jenny lived with their parents in Indianapolis. However, their mother was arrested and jailed for theft in July. Their father, Lester, then arranged for his young daughters to stay with Gertrude Benizzi, a mother of two daughters, Paula and Stephanie, whom the Sylvia sisters had met at Arsenal Technical High School. Gertrude agreed to care for the girls as her own until Lester returned. After July 4th, Sylvia and Jenny moved into Gertrude's home at 3850 East New York Street. Meanwhile, their father, brother, and later their mother traveled to the East Coast for the festival. Gertrude would receive $20 a week to care for the sisters until November. At first, things seemed normal at Gertrude's house. Sylvia got along well with Stephanie, and they enjoyed activities such as singing along to pop songs and helping around the house. The Sylvia sisters regularly attended Sunday school with the other Benizzi children, and Sylvia was praised by the pastor for her kindness and respect. Problems arose, however, when Sylvia's father, Lester, began to pay Gertrude late, often a day or two after the due date. These delays frustrated Gertrude, leading her to abuse the sisters. She began to spank their bare bottoms with various objects, such as a quarter-inch paddle, and curse them. As the late payments became more frequent, the abuse and beatings escalated. On one occasion, Paula reported that Sylvia and her sisters had eaten too much at church dinner. As a result, both girls were spanked about 15 times on the back with the paddle. This occurred just a month after they moved in with Gertrude's family, in late August. Gertrude's behavior became increasingly abusive, with Sylvia as the primary target. It is possible that Gertrude's jealousy of Sylvia's youth and beauty contributed to her actions. Over time, the abuse became worse, with more frequent beatings. Sylvia was often starved. They were given only leftovers or spoiled food from the trash. On one occasion, she was falsely accused of stealing candy that she had actually bought. On another occasion, she was publicly humiliated when Sylvia told Stephanie and Jenny about a boyfriend she had in Long Beach, whom she had met while her family was living in California. She shared stories of her time with him, including one in which she snuggled under the covers with him. Gertrude asked Sylvia why she did that, and Sylvia shrugged and said she didn't know. A few days later, Gertrude brought up the subject again, this time making a sarcastic comment about Sylvia's growing belly and hinting that she might be pregnant. Sylvia thought Gertrude was joking and joked along. However, Gertrude continued to make things worse, repeatedly mentioning Sylvia's interactions with Son and hinting that she was pregnant. The situation turned violent when Gertrude suddenly kicked Sylvia in the genitals. Gertrude's overweight and pregnant daughter, Paula, who was jealous of Sylvia's appearance, joined in the attack. She pulled Sylvia out of the chair and onto the kitchen floor, screaming that Sylvia didn't deserve to sit in the chair. In another incident, while the family was having dinner, Gertrude, Paula, and a neighbor boy, Randy Gordon Lepper, forced Sylvia to eat a hot dog filled with mustard, ketchup, and relish. As expected, Sylvia vomited, and they brutally forced her to swallow what she had vomited. Sylvia was so upset that she spread rumors at school, accusing Stephanie and Paula of prostitution. When a boy at school approached Stephanie with offers, saying that Sylvia was the one who spread the rumors, Stephanie confronted Sylvia when she got home. Sylvia confessed to being the one who spread the rumors. Then, in retaliation, Stephanie punched her very hard. Sylvia apologized and cried. Stephanie's 15-year-old boyfriend, Randolph Hubbard, found out about the incident and the rumors, and then violently assaulted Sylvia. He slapped her, slammed her head against the wall, and threw her to the floor. Stephanie's mother, Gertrude, also joined in, hitting Sylvia several times with a paddle. Daily life at Gertrude's house was a nightmare of increasingly violent episodes. On one occasion, Paula punched Sylvia in the face so hard that she broke her own wrist, concentrating her blows on Sylvia's mouth and eyes. Paula then used a brace on her arm to beat Sylvia even harder. The abuse the Sylvia sisters suffered was not limited to physical violence. Gertrude also abused them verbally and psychologically. On one occasion, she falsely accused Sylvia of being a slut and a prostitute, criticizing the immorality of prostitution and the degradation of women. Gertrude then forced her younger sister Jenny to beat her, threatening that if she refused, she would suffer the same abuse as Sylvia. The Sylvia sisters were abused not only by Gertrude's family, but also by Coy Hubbard and his classmates, who frequently visited Gertrude's home. They would verbally and physically abuse Sylvia, and often with the participation of Gertrude and her children. Neighborhood children also frequently beat Sylvia, using her as a punching bag in violent judo training sessions. They would burn her body, burn her skin with sticks, and cause severe injuries to her genitals. In one particularly humiliating incident, Sylvia was forced to strip in the living room and masturbate with a bottle. Gertrude would later tell everyone that this humiliating act was to show Jenny what kind of person her sister was. Over time, Gertrude banned Sylvia from school after she confessed to stealing a gym outfit from school. Sylvia had taken the outfit because Gertrude had not bought her clothes. As a result, Sylvia's education was disrupted and she was severely punished. Gertrude regularly beat her with a 7-inch police belt. The situation escalated when Gertrude changed the subject to premarital sex and then kicked Sylvia in the genitals. During this attack, Stephanie defended Sylvia, shouting, "She didn't do anything." Gertrude continued to torture her by burning Sylvia's fingertips with matches before continuing to beat her. A few days later, Gertrude used a police belt to beat Jenny several times. Jenny is said to have taken a tennis shoe from school to put on her stronger foot. As the torture and abuse worsened, Sylvia was not allowed to use the bathroom and was forced to wet the bed as punishment for her incontinence. On October 6, 1965, Gertrude took Sylvia to the basement, tied her up, and barely fed or watered her. She was often tied to the basement stair railing with her feet barely touching the ground. Gertrude's family would occasionally stop abusing Sylvia to watch their favorite television show. Sylvia's tragic ordeal even involved the neighborhood children, who paid 5 cents each to participate in her humiliation, beating, burning, and eventually mutilation during her captivity in the basement. Gertrude and her children bound and gagged Sylvia, then placed her in a bathtub filled with hot water, and rubbed salt into her wounds. After this incident, the father of a neighbor boy named Michael John Monroe anonymously called the Arsenal School to report that a girl with sores all over her body was living at Gertrude's house. A school nurse came to Gertrude's house to investigate, as Sylvia had been absent from school for several days. However, Gertrude lied to the nurse, saying that Sylvia had run away the previous week and that she did not know where she was. Gertrude attributed Sylvia's sores to poor personal hygiene. Gertrude also claimed that Sylvia had been a negative influence on both her children and her sister. The school did not investigate further, neglecting to check on Sylvia's health or whereabouts. In mid-October, Gertrude's son, John Banaszewski Jr. played a cruel prank on Sylvia. He offered her a plate of soup, but quickly snatched it away when she tried to eat it with her hands. By this time, Sylvia was severely malnourished. Gertrude allowed Sylvia to sleep upstairs that night, but only if she did not wet the bed. Before going to bed, Sylvia secretly asked Jenny for a glass of water. The next morning, Gertrude discovered that Sylvia had accidentally wet the bed. To punish Sylvia, Gertrude forced her to masturbate again with a glass jar in front of Gertrude's children. Immediately afterwards, Gertrude yelled at Sylvia to go back to the kitchen. She then ordered Sylvia to strip. Gertrude told Sylvia, "You branded my daughter, now I will brand you." Using a hot needle, Gertrude began carving the words, "I am a prostitute and proud of it," into Sylvia's stomach. While Gertrude was still carving, she told 14-year-old Richard Hobbs to finish carving the words into Sylvia's skin. Meanwhile, Gertrude took Jenny to a nearby grocery store. Richard continued carving the words into Sylvia's stomach as she gritted her teeth and groaned in pain. Later, Richard and 10-year-old Shirley took Sylvia into the basement. They tried to burn the letter "Des" under Sylvia's left breast with an anchor bolt. The resulting deep burned scar looked like the number 3. That terrible night, Sylvia confided in her younger sister Jenny, saying that she was sure she would die from the unbearable abuse. The next day, Gertrude forced Sylvia to write a letter, the contents to fool her parents into thinking that Sylvia had run away from Gertrude's house. The letter was intended to falsely accuse a group of local boys of mistreating and harming Sylvia, claiming that she had initially consented to sexual intercourse with them. After the letter was written, Gertrude planned to have John Jr. and Jenny blindfold Sylvia, take her to a nearby wooded area called Jimmy Woods, and leave her for dead. However, this plan was not immediately carried out. Instead, Sylvia was tied to the railing of the basement stairs. Gertrude offered her biscuits, but Sylvia refused, offering to give them to the dog. Angered, Gertrude stuffed the biscuits into Sylvia's mouth, and she and her son John began to beat Sylvia savagely, aiming for her stomach. On October 26th, Sylvia's condition worsened. She had difficulty speaking and could no longer move her limbs properly. Gertrude took her into the kitchen, pressed her against the wall, and tried to feed her a donut and a glass of milk, but Sylvia was unable to hold the glass of milk properly. Gertrude became frustrated and assaulted Sylvia. After being thrown to the floor and returned to the basement, Sylvia became delirious, moaning and mumbling continuously. When Paula asked her to recite the alphabet, Sylvia could not read past the first 4 letters, indicating that her cognitive abilities were severely impaired. She was also unable to get up from the floor. That afternoon, a group of neighborhood tormentors gathered in the basement, and Sylvia attempted to identify them, waving her arms and shouting names. However, her efforts were hampered by her increasingly deteriorating physical and mental condition. After being repeatedly abused, Sylvia attempted to escape from the basement but collapsed from exhaustion before reaching the stairs. As a result, she faced severe punishment. Gertrude hit Sylvia hard on the head, knocking her unconscious, then stood there watching her for a while. At 5:30 p.m., Richard Hobbs arrived at Gertrude's house and went straight to the basement. There, he found Stephanie crying, holding Sylvia's weak and badly injured body. Her mother Gertrude instructed Stephanie to clean Sylvia, but Stephanie and Richard decided instead to bathe Sylvia with warm soapy water and dress her in clean clothes. After bathing, they placed Sylvia on a mattress in one of the bedrooms. In her final moments, Sylvia expressed her final wishes, to be with her father or at least taken home. After enduring severe punishment and weakened by lack of food, she eventually died from her injuries. When Stephanie discovered that Sylvia was no longer breathing, she attempted to revive her with artificial respiration. Meanwhile, Gertrude claimed that Sylvia had been faking her death. Initially, Gertrude beat Sylvia's body with a book. When Sylvia was found dead, Gertrude panicked and ordered Richard Hobbs to call the police from a nearby pay phone. When the police arrived at the address around 6:30 p.m., Gertrude led them to the bedroom, where they found Sylvia's badly beaten and mutilated body on a dirty mattress. Gertrude gave the police a letter that Sylvia had been forced to write. Gertrude claimed that she had cared for Sylvia for more than an hour before her death and had applied antiseptic to her wounds in an attempt to provide first aid. She told the police that Sylvia had run away with some teenagers earlier, but had returned that afternoon, topless and holding the note. Holding a Bible, Paula told everyone in the house that Sylvia's death was preordained. She then turned to Jenny and calmly said, "If you want to stay with us, we will treat you like one of our sisters." However, Jenny was urged to say something to the police before they arrived. Jenny recounted the events leading up to Sylvia's death at the request of Gertrude's family. Jenny then whispered to the police to take them away, and she told them everything. Jenny Lycan's official statement led to the arrest of Gertrude, Paula, Stephanie, and John Jr. Banaszewski on suspicion of Sylvia's murder, just hours after her body was discovered. Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs were also arrested and charged with the same crime on the same day. Gertrude and Coy Hubbard's 3 older children were taken to a nearby juvenile detention center, while Gertrude and Richard Hobbs' younger children were detained at the Indianapolis Children's Home. All were held without bail until trial. Initially, Gertrude denied any involvement in Sylvia Lycan's death. However, within a day of her arrest, she admitted to knowing the children and admitted that her daughter, Paula, and Coy Hubbard had physically and mentally abused Sylvia. Gertrude also admitted to forcing Sylvia to sleep in the basement 3 times after she wet the bed. When asked about possible causes of Sylvia's incontinence, including emotional distress and kidney injury, Gertrude was evasive. Paula showed no remorse and signed a statement admitting to repeatedly hitting Sylvia. She also admitted to other acts of cruelty, such as pushing Sylvia down the basement stairs multiple times. John Jr. admitted to hitting Sylvia and frequently abusing her with his fists. He also confessed to burning Sylvia with matches on multiple occasions and said that his mother had burned Sylvia with cigarettes on multiple occasions. Sylvia Lycan's autopsy revealed severe and widespread injuries, with over 150 separate wounds throughout her body. She was severely malnourished at the time of her death. The injuries varied in location, type, severity, and stage of healing, and included burns, severe bruising, and significant damage to muscles and nerves. In addition, her vaginal cavity was swollen and nearly closed, and the autopsy found that her hymen was intact, refuting Gertrude's claim that Sylvia was 3 months pregnant and the allegations of prostitution and promiscuity. Sylvia Lycan's official cause of death was severe head trauma resulting in bleeding into the brain. The cause was a blow to the right side of her head. The doctor also noted that Sylvia's body had suffered severe damage from prolonged abuse of her skin and underlying tissues, as well as prolonged malnutrition. Sylvia's body was found and it was estimated that she had likely died within 8 hours of her discovery. An autopsy revealed that Sylvia had been recently bathed, possibly after her death, which could have affected the rate of loss of body temperature and the onset of rigor mortis. Gertrude Banaszewski, her children Paula and John, and 2 young neighbors, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were tried and convicted in May 1966 for the neglect, torture, and murder of Sylvia. After 8 hours of deliberations, the jury found Gertrude guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced her to life in prison. She was paroled in 1985. Paula was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. She later appealed and was retried in 1971, where she pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 2 to 21 years in prison. She was released from prison in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were convicted of manslaughter and spent less than 2 years in the Indiana House of Reform before being paroled on February 27, 1968. Indiana residents consider the torture and murder of Sylvia Likens to be the worst crime in the state's history. Sylvia died on October 26 in Indianapolis, Indiana, before her parents could return to pick her and her sister up in November. The sisters did not want to report the increasing abuse and neglect to family members or school, fearing that speaking out would only make things worse. Jenny, the younger sister, was threatened by Gertrude that she would be abused and tortured like her sister if she spoke up. Jenny was also bullied by neighborhood girls, who would taunt or attack her whenever she mentioned her sister's plight. Neighbors, including a middle-aged couple who lived nearby, saw signs that the girls were being abused, but no one dared to report it to the police. All those involved in Sylvia's torture and murder were sentenced to prison. Although some perpetrators do not serve full prison sentences, they will forever be haunted by the consequences and horror of their actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970. He, along with his older brother, grew up in Indiana, United States. Born into a middle-class family, John was an ambitious young man with a strong desire for independence and self-improvement. Right after graduating from high school, he began looking for ways to make money. His brother recalls that John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant, but he left the position quickly for unknown reasons, and he feeling frustrated at work. However, this setback did not dampen his ambitions. Soon after, he found a new job that offered him greater independence and helped him realize his true passion, sales. John's career took off when he became a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. At first, his family doubted his decision, but he quickly proved them wrong. By the end of his first year, John had become the top salesperson in the area. He worked diligently, often putting in 12 to 16 hours a day, which earned him recognition at company meetings and the respect of his peers. John's success inspired other salespeople, who came to him for guidance, new ideas, and motivation, and he happily took on a leadership role. During this period, John met Judy, a 20 years old from Texas. She comes from a low-income family. Born in October 1969, Judy was confident and outgoing. Although John wasn't looking to hire new salespeople at the time, Judy's enthusiasm and assertiveness convinced him to give her a chance. Despite being young, but Judy had already experienced significant life events. At 14, with her parents' permission, she had gotten married and later divorced, resulting in 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks. John decided to mentor Judy in vacuum cleaner sales. Judy to be a quick learner, and she not only earning a spot on John's sales team but also winning his affection. The two eventually started dating each other. John's life was thriving. He was renowned for his exceptional sales skills and training abilities, and Judy's support in both his personal and professional life. This foundation gave John the confidence to launch his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. As part of his venture, John offered training sessions to salespeople, sharing effective strategies he developed and the passion that drove his success. His company rose to become one of the area's top performers, and John consistently credited his success to Judy's unwavering support. In 1992, John and Judy got married, having established stability in their professional lives. In the following years, they dedicate themselves to demonstrating what a good salesperson can achieve in life. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica, in addition to Judy's 2 children from a previous relationship, Christina and Daniel. After that, their family moved residences several times, always to nicer houses, giving their children access to better schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had no issues with his stepchildren. While Daniel was energetic and sometimes mischievous, Christina was a sweet and well-behaved child. John and Judy enjoyed a comfortable life, and John used his wealth as motivation for young salespeople he trained, proving that hard work and determination can bring about a prosperous life. As Christina and Daniel entered teenage years, problems arose. Christina began associating with people who exhibited poor behavior and allegedly engaged in underage drinking and even drug use. At the same time, Daniel, who was 13, was dealing with anger issues and hanging out with a questionable group of friends. One incident occurred when Daniel took his father John's car and drove recklessly through the neighborhood with his friends, knocking down and damaging several mailbox posts. To avoid trouble with the police, John took responsibility for the damage and personally paid the affected homeowners the next day. Around this time, John received a complaint from his stepson's school regarding the boy's misconduct. Unfortunately, the situation escalated, and John physically struck the young man, causing further strain on their relationship. 9 years after the family began living together, Judy decided to take them on a trip to Texas, where she grew up. During this visit, Judy expressed her concerns to her brother about her troubled marriage and the mistreatment of Christina and Daniel by John. However, Judy blamed John for her children's problems, and she made excuses for their misbehavior, which made their family problems worse. John's life became even more complicated when he began to suspect his wife of having an affair, specifically with one of his employees. To uncover the truth, John took matters into his own hands. He installed cameras in several parts of the office and eventually obtained clear evidence of his wife's infidelity. This discovery was a real shock to John, completely changing his previously happy and friendly personality. John's behavior deteriorated as he began drinking excessively, leading to intense arguments with Judy and violent outbursts towards his children. When Tiffany's teacher informed John that she hadn't brought her homework, he punished her with a belt, leaving visible marks. The teacher reported the incident to social services the next day, after seeing the injuries. Before social services arrived, John intimidated the children by implying that if they wanted to maintain their comfortable life, they should remain silent about the beating. As a result, Tiffany falsely accused Daniel of being responsible, and he didn't deny it. John's bad mood affected not only his family, but also his employees and the company's clients, who suffered through his fits of anger as a result of his wife's infidelity. In an attempt to create distance between his wife and the person she was involved with, John moved his family to a more affluent area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite still loving his wife and hoping that a change of environment would give them a fresh start, the situation did not improve. While Judy lost weight and changed her style to improve her appearance, John did the opposite. He let himself go, grew a beard, started smoking, and only wore jeans. His preoccupation with his personal problems left him constantly distracted. As a result, the business began to suffer, teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. John was forced to sell his boat to stay financially afloat. Rumors spread throughout the office that Judy was having an affair with Jeff, John's closest business associate. Although the validity of these rumors was uncertain, but they put more strain on John and Judy's already troubled marriage. John's world was turned upside down when Judy told him she wanted a divorce. However, John made it clear that if she left him, she would be left with nothing. He felt he had given her everything, including lifting her out of poverty, accepting her children, providing her with luxuries, and loving her. However, he became exasperated when she decides to leave, threatening that if she leaves him, she will leave with empty hands. John possessed a crucial piece of evidence, a recording of Judy having an affair with Jeff. As a result, their relationship became more strained in early 2003, which also affected their children's behavior. On Thursday, April 17, 2013, John and Judy attempted to resolve their issues over dinner at a restaurant. After finishing dinner, they called home to check on the children and said they would be back soon. However, their plans changed when Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. Leaving the restaurant, they went to the company and John brought the rest of the dinner to Jeff, who was working late. When they arrived at the office in an isolated industrial area around 10 p.m., John went inside to talk to Jeff while Judy quickly retrieved the notebook and returned to their car. Minutes after, John left the office. He opened the rear door on the driver's side of his vehicle to retrieve something. Suddenly, 2 loud gunshots rang out, and John fell to the ground in the parking lot. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911 to report the incident. Police and medical units arrived at the scene quickly. Sadly, 33-year-old John Parker was found to have been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, Judy, who was inside the vehicle when the shots were fired, was questioned by the authorities. She told them she was sitting in the car when her husband, John, came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side. Her account was limited, as she did not see what happened next, only hearing the 2 loud gunshots after John opened the door. Judy remembered that when she heard the shots, she immediately hid behind the seat. When she cautiously lifted her head, she caught a brief glimpse of a man wearing dark clothing fleeing the scene. They also noticed that John's wallet was missing, leading them to initially believe it was a robbery. As investigators took a closer look, they started to question the details surrounding John's death. Since no one knew about Judy and John's plans, several inconsistencies stood out. What could be the motive for targeting an empty industrial area at night when there would be no one around? If the goal was robbery, it doesn't make sense that the perpetrator would kill John before taking his belongings, especially when he was wearing a $20,000 gold Rolex and other easily accessible valuables. Moreover, why didn't the thief search John's pockets? This is a common action in robberies. The investigation into John's death raised more questions than it answered. 2 bullet casings found at the scene matched Judy's claim of hearing 2 shots. It was clear that one of the shots had killed John instantly, but there was no official information about the second shot. The investigators started by taking a statement from Judy, the key witness to the incident. Judy reported that her husband had previously gotten into an argument with one of his employees. She was able to identify the employee involved in the argument, but beyond this, she had no additional information to provide beyond what she had already shared at the scene. The investigators also spoke with Jeff, who was inside the office at the time of the shooting. However, he was unable to provide any useful information, as he did not exit the office until after the shots had been fired and the incident was over. The authorities informed Christina that her stepfather had passed away. After nearly ruling out a robbery motive, detectives shifted their investigation to focus on the people close to John, starting with an employee who had previously expressed resentment towards him. The employee confirmed that they had a significant disagreement, but claimed that it had been peacefully resolved. He also provided an alibi, which was thoroughly investigated and verified. The investigation was expanded to cover almost all individuals associated with John, including those he did business with. Past and present employees, competitors in his industry, and his personal friends and social connections. The investigation into John's murder revealed a new lead involving Judy. Unlike what is typically expected of a grieving person, her behavior during her husband's funeral was unusual, as she seemed cheerful and was chatting with friends. Another notable observation was that her ex-husband seemed completely unbothered by the incident, calmly reading a newspaper just 4 days after John's murder. Daniel, 15, was brought in for questioning on suspicion of being involved in the murder. The police suspected him because of an incident 6 months earlier. At that time, gang members told the police that Daniel had paid them to kill his stepfather, John. However, the gang members claimed they never planned to carry out the murder and just kept the money. The police didn't find their story believable and took the money, but they didn't seem to do anything more about it at the time. Later, after John was killed, the police decided to re-examine whether Daniel might be involved in the crime. During questioning, Daniel admitted to paying people to hurt John, but not intending to kill him, but rather injure him, specifically by breaking his legs. Authorities did detain one of the individuals Daniel to have hired, but this person was released after a thorough investigation verified their alibi. Daniel was eventually released after 9 days due to insufficient evidence and because he was a minor. As the case unfolded, it became clear that John had prior conflicts with the children of Judy, Christina, and Daniel. This led to further scrutiny of Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. Christina denied any involvement when questioned by investigators. Both Christina and Daniel expressed a desire to eliminate John, leading investigators to wonder where the money for these schemes came from, and they suspected that Judy might be the one giving them the money to carry out these plans. When investigators looked more closely, they discovered that before John's death, he and Judy's relationship had deteriorated partly due to Judy's infidelity. Despite this, it appeared John had no intention of leaving Judy and was instead working on saving their troubled marriage. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband appeared to be financial gain. Detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. Following John's death, Judy tried to collect the insurance money, but the insurance company initially denied her claim due to the ongoing investigation into his death. The payment was also postponed because John's father suspected Judy was involved in his son's death and was investigating further. The case eventually stalled due to lack of concrete evidence, but a lot has changed in John's family. Judy was rarely at home, she devoting her time to her new partner, Jeff, who was also John's manager. As a result, Christina and Daniel took on more responsibilities, caring for their younger sisters, Tiffany and Erica. After several months, Judy and Jeff decided to relocate out of state with John's younger daughters, Tiffany and Erica. Around this time, Daniel went to live with his biological father, while Christina remained in the house, now pregnant and in a relationship with her boyfriend. The investigation was stalled, but the authorities didn't give up. They kept the case open and repeatedly reviewed the files, hoping to find a clue new. This persistence eventually paid off. The detectives received a new lead, which led them to question some of the classmates of Christina and Daniel. The classmates confessed to selling a gun to Christina and Daniel, which sparked an investigation into a family John-owned piece of land that Christina used for target practice. When investigators searched the area, they found multiple spent bullet casings. Laboratory analysis of these casings revealed a crucial piece of evidence. The casings matched those found at John's 2007 crime scene. New information came to light when a narcotics officer revealed that Christina's ex-boyfriend had been involved in a drug-related case. With the hope of receiving a lighter sentence, Christina's ex-boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In the conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot. When confronted with this new evidence, Christina began to cooperate. As the owner of the gun used in the crime, the 21-year-old Christina admitted to buying the weapon. She also admitted that on the night of the incident, she had asked her parents to visit the office, claiming she had left her homework behind there. Christina admitted to being involved in plot to kill John and stated that her younger brother Daniel was designated as the person who would open fire. When Daniel was found and arrested in Arizona, he was confronted with the new evidence and Christina's confession. Daniel confessed to shooting John, but claimed that their mother, Judy, was the one who had come up with the plan. According to Daniel, Judy had stolen $7,500 by forging company checks and had used this money to try to hire someone to kill John, but ultimately decided to have Daniel do it instead. Judy's original plan failed when the individuals she hired took the payment but did not complete the task. At that point, Judy instructed them to buy a gun for her son to use instead. Furthermore, Daniel revealed that it was Judy who created the excuse for her and John to leave the house that night. When Christina called to pick up her homework that she had left at company, he shot John in the head. The second shot occurred accidentally as Daniel rummaged through John's pockets, searching for his wallet as his mother had instructed. Following the shooting, Daniel returned home without alerting his younger sisters. His sister Christina helped by distracting Tiffany and Erica with television, allowing Daniel to enter the house unnoticed. Christina and Daniel claimed that their mother manipulated them into committing the crime. By telling them they had been abused by John and promising that by doing so, they would gain a better life with more freedom and financial stability. However, this was not Judy's first attempt to harm her husband, as she had previously tried to poison his food, which led to he being briefly hospitalized. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. However, Christina entered a not guilty plea for the conspiracy charge and was released on bail a few months later. In 2008, when Daniel was 20 years old, he pleaded guilty to conspiring to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to cooperate and testify against his mother in exchange for a lighter sentence. Instead of being charged with murder, he would face a sentence of 20 to 25 years in prison for conspiracy. According to Daniel, the plan to kill John began nearly a year before the incident, when he was just 14 years old. Judy and Christina initially brought the idea to him. He claimed, and Judy supplied him with a gun and other necessary items for the crime. These items included money to buy black clothing, gloves, and a mask. His mother also instructed him on how to commit the crime without leaving any evidence behind, including taking a thorough shower to eliminate gunpowder residue after returning home. Then Judy took charge of getting rid of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. 6 years later, in July 2009, Judy knew she couldn't escape the law anymore and turned herself in. She agreed to plead guilty to conspiracy to commit murder, admitting she had planned, carried out, and tried to cover up the crime. The prosecutors wanted Judy to spend the rest of her life in prison, with a minimum sentence of 28 years and a maximum sentence of 35 years. Judy, who was nearly 40 years old at the time, was given a 33-year prison sentence in August 2009. The next month, her co-conspirator Daniel received a 23-year sentence. Christina was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Press reports said Daniel was released in 2017 after participating in a community transition court program and that he subsequently chose to live a low-profile life. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but sadly died from a drug overdose shortly after. This case is a tragic example of how greed can lead people to commit terrible crimes. Judy's actions had devastating consequences for her family. Despite overcoming early struggles and achieving success, her desire for more led her to destroy the life of a successful businessman, John Parker. Her actions also deeply affected her 4 children, leaving 2 in prison and taking away their father. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of McDonald family. Jeffrey McDonald was born on October 12, 1943, in New York, USA. He was a well-known figure in his youth, serving as the quarterback for his high school football team and being very popular among his peers. After graduating from Princeton, Jeffrey attended medical school and completed an internship at a prestigious medical center in New York. He married Colette Stevenson, a high school acquaintance. Shortly after their wedding, they welcomed their daughter Kimberly, and 3 years later, their son Kristen was born. After completing his education, Jeffrey joined the Army and was later accepted into the elite Green Berets. In the next 2 years, Jeffrey was assigned to the Fort Bragg military base in North Carolina. After a period of frequent relocations, their life finally became stable. They settled in the nearby city of Fayetteville and lived in a house provided by the state. Jeffrey returned home from work at 6 p.m. and no longer had to go on business trips, which allowed Colette to feel more at ease. She hoped that once Jeffrey completed his service in a few years, they could move to their own farmhouse, away from the city's hustle and bustle. At the time of the tragedy, Colette was pregnant with their third child, and everything seemed perfect. Their love story tragically turned into one of the most horrific crime episodes in U.S. history. At approximately 3:30 a.m. on February 17, 1970, the operator of the Fayetteville Rescue Service received a call from a man identifying himself as Captain Jeffrey McDonald. He reported that a violent attack had taken place in his home, stating that his wife had been stabbed to death and possibly raped. He was unclear about the fate of his children and urged for immediate assistance. The dispatcher quickly dispatched a police car to the scene. As the police were heading to the house, they saw a strange woman standing in the rain at 3:55 a.m., wearing a wide-brimmed hat. She was doing nothing and appeared to be waiting for something. However, the officers didn't have time to investigate further, so they drove past her. A few minutes later, they arrived at the Jeffrey family home, where the police entered through the back door because the lights inside were off. In the first room, officers discovered the body of a woman lying on the floor, showing no signs of life. She was covered in blood, and her position suggested she may have been raped. Her face was severely disfigured. She lay on her back next to her injured husband. As the first officer approached, Jeffrey urgently inquired about the fate of his children, whom he had heard screaming but could not get to. Another police officer searched the other rooms and found a brutal scene in the children's bedroom, where they discovered the mutilated head of 5-year-old Kimberly, with her neck and upper body also bearing multiple stab wounds. In another room, 2-year-old Kristen lay on the bed, suffering from multiple injuries to his back and chest. Jeffrey was in serious condition, having been stabbed in the head and upper chest. At one point, he lost consciousness, but a police officer was able to revive him to gather information about the incident. Jeffrey reported that 3 men and 1 woman had broken into the house. He suspected they were hippies, noting that one of the men was dark-skinned and wore a jacket with a sergeant's insignia. He also described a suspicious woman in a hat whom the police had encountered earlier, but unfortunately, it was too late to find her that night. Jeffrey was the only survivor of the attack that night, while the others sadly did not make it. He received first aid to treat his wounds, including a serious lung injury, and was given a sedative. Once stabilized, police spoke with him about the incident. He recounted that he and his wife had shared a glass of orange juice mixed with alcohol that evening. Since their daughter was sleeping, he decided to sleep on the couch in the living room. Jeffrey falls asleep in front of the TV but suddenly wakes up to intense pain. He is being attacked by 3 unidentified assailants. A woman in a hat stands to one side, holding a flashlight or candle, watching the attack. Jeffrey thinks the attackers look like hippies on drugs. The woman gives orders to the men. Chaos then erupts, and Jeffrey loses consciousness. When he regains consciousness, he finds his wife unresponsive. He tries to give her first aid, but to no avail. Desperate to get to his children, he finds himself unable to move due to his injuries, so he calls 911. The Army Criminal Investigation Department sent the most inexperienced the staff to the scene. After examining the area, he concluded that Jeffrey's story was not true. The officer found the story of Jeffrey with the hippies unlikely. He found no evidence that others were present. After this decision, the investigation shifted its focus to proving Jeffrey's guilt. The head of the McDonald family was arrested and Jeffrey was charged with 3 counts of criminal conspiracy. The case quickly turned into a disaster. From the outset, Jeffrey's defense attorneys aimed to assess the professionalism of the police during the search of the house. Through cross-examination, it was discovered that numerous violations had occurred. The procedures used had compromised the integrity of the evidence and the crime scene. The area had been essentially trampled, making it extremely difficult to identify any traces left by the criminals. This situation allowed the defense to argue that the prosecution's conclusion about Jeffrey's involvement in the crimes was incorrect, and that the killers were strangers, hippies. Jeffrey was a devoted family man, a caring father and husband, and a respected professional. As a result, he had many supporters, including colleagues who believed in his innocence. They felt there was no motive for the murder and found it hard to believe he would harm himself just to fake a near-death experience. His grandfather, Freddie Cassap, was so upset that he started a nationwide campaign to prove Jeffrey's innocence. Meanwhile, an article criticized the military justice system for holding closed hearings that excluded the public and the media. The situation did not improve. The trial remained hidden from public view, with more evidence later presented to the Supreme Court highlighting police incompetence. The investigation was sloppy. The ambulance driver tampered with evidence at the scene and even stole Jeffrey's wallet while police were present. An Army doctor compromised crucial evidence, including hair samples needed for comparison. Fingerprints were mixed up with various items such as a phone and a baby bottle. Most of the people involved in the investigation were inexperienced and unprofessional. The number of violations identified continued to grow with each minute of questioning. The investigation received an unexpected tip about a young woman seen on the street in the rain, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Her name was Helena Stokely. Helena was the daughter of a retired Army officer and had a troubled connection with the criminal world. While she was a police informant, she was also deeply involved in the hippie culture and had been selling illegal substances for many years. The police interviewed Helena and obtained valuable information about her associates. However, serious mistakes occurred during the interrogation. Notably, the police failed to record the conversation, which was necessary for presenting evidence in court. The inexperienced police claimed that the investigation into Helena's involvement was still ongoing. However, the situation worsened so much that the police simply did not know where she was. She fled when everyone realized the full scale of the incompetence that was committed during the Army investigation. The investigation must start all over again on all issues. Despite this, the military leadership still kept the hearing closed to the media. Meanwhile, one police officer chose to share information with journalists about the mistakes made by the Army Commission of the Armed Forces. This angered the military leadership even more. While everyone else believed he was innocent, the military commission refused to acknowledge their own incompetence. Unfortunately, they held significant power and were unwilling to back down. They asserted that, although there was no clear motive for the crime, Jeffrey might have used substances that could provoke aggression and potentially lead to murder. Contrary to the prosecution's allegations, witnesses began to testify that Jeffrey was a loving husband and father. The defense presented a large body of evidence in support of this view. Furthermore, at the time of the massacre, Jeffrey was in a stable mental state. Only a small amount of alcohol was found in his system, which would not have significantly impaired his judgment or led him to commit such violent acts. Along with friends and family who testified, qualified experts, including a psychiatrist, evaluated Jeffrey and concluded that he was sane and had no homicidal tendencies toward his family. Even the civil police believed that Jeffrey was innocent due to the lack of evidence against him. His mother had to sell their house to afford legal fees. Ultimately, he was cleared of charges due to insufficient evidence. However, this did not stop the Army Commission from reopening the investigation later on. The military police promised to persist in their efforts to convict Captain Jeffrey MacDonald, regardless of the previous investigation's flaws. They believed that their earlier mistakes did not rule out the possibility of Jeffrey's guilt. The situation was not serious and did not significantly affect the outcome. Jeffrey resigned from the U.S. Army. Disillusioned with the military, he began a campaign to expose the armed forces through the media. However, he was unaware of the powerful enemies he was facing and the dangers that would be placed upon him. Meanwhile, the police found Helena Stokely. She claimed to have witnessed the murder of the MacDonald family, allegedly committed by her friends. Helena was willing to testify in court, hoping to be granted immunity from prosecution. Her testimony was verified through a lie detector test. Despite this, the military leadership refused to consider any other suspects, focusing solely on Jeffrey and preparing to charge him again. In the summer of 1971, Jeffrey and a friend moved to Long Beach, California, in search of a fresh start. Initially not realizing that a conspiracy was brewing against him, they both found jobs in the emergency department of a medical center, where their efforts helped make it the best department in the entire facility. Jeffrey's skills were highly regarded, leading to his work being published in medical journals. He also became an advocate for children's rights, fighting against child abuse. The military prosecutor's office continued to reopen the case, and on the grounds that they had obtained Jeffrey's psychiatric reports, he was charged again. The trial was scheduled for mid-1979 and a smear campaign began. It was a high-profile case, and from the start, the armed forces were formed to fight Jeffries. And at that time, people from the highest echelons of power rallied against Jeffrey, a former Army captain. Assistant U.S. Attorney James Blackburn wanted to use the case as a springboard for his career. He was later convicted of forgery, fraud, and embezzlement. But at the time of the triple murder retrial, Jeffrey's reputation was impeccable. The assistant prosecutor had concealed evidence that proved Jeffrey's innocence. And the Attorney General was not even allowed to conduct his own independent examination of the evidence collected or review the case file. It was clear that the judge was biased toward the prosecution, which affected the outcome of the trial. Any evidence that could have proven that Jeffrey innocent was not presented to the jury or provided to Jeffrey's attorney. For example, the victim was found holding 5 strands of light-colored hair. The prosecution claimed that these hairs came from a doll owned by the victim's daughter. However, they actually belonged to Helena Stokely, who was wearing a light-colored wig that she removed shortly after the murder. Additionally, a hair belonging to Jeffrey was found in the victim's hand, but since he lived there, this was not unusual and could have been a coincidence. This evidence did not prove Jeffrey's guilt. The skin particles found under Kimberly and Kristen's fingernails were not their father's and were identified as belonging to the attackers. However, the particles were never analyzed and eventually disappeared. This evidence, along with much else that could have proven Jeffrey's innocence, was deliberately ignored at trial. A key part of the prosecution's case was the pajama fibers found on the chisel believed to have been used to kill Jeffrey's children. The prosecution claimed the chisel was the weapon used and contained particles from the clothing Jeffrey was wearing when police found him on the night of the triple murder. Years later, it was discovered that these claims were false. Police found several black fibers on the chisel that matched those found on the bodies of Kristen and Kimberly. However, these fibers did not match any of the clothing from the MacDonald's home. Additionally, wax droplets were found at the crime scene that did not match any of the candles from the victims' homes. These wax droplets were actually used by Helena Stokely in her rituals. Helena claimed to be a witch and practiced magic, which became a key factor in the case. The prosecution made a strong claim that fibers from Jeffrey's pajamas were found in Colette's hair. However, this claim was later proven to be false. The defense attorney, Jeffrey, was unable to object to this assertion at the hearing because it had never been mentioned before. There were also other false pieces of evidence, including claims of bloody marks on the couple's bed sheets, which the prosecution argued indicated that the husband had dragged his wife's body. It was later revealed that these bloody marks did not exist. Furthermore, the prosecution was unaware of important information at the hearing. Specifically, the prosecution was unaware that Helena Stokely had contacted the FBI in 1978, claiming that she was involved in a triple homicide while she was being treated for depression and had attempted to end her life in the hospital. During the trial, Helena said that on the day of the massacre, she was with her boyfriend Greg Mitchell and some soldiers from Fort Braga. They were all using drugs, and according to her, they lost control. Helena mentioned that she called the McDonald family's house late at night to check if everyone was home, but she couldn't remember what happened afterward. The military police then approached her, and she felt so intimidated that during the second trial, she was unable to recount events between midnight and 5 a.m. However, she did acknowledge having a hat and a light wig, which were later destroyed because they could potentially serve as evidence against her. At trial, Helena claimed she had been present at the massacre, holding a candle and muttering strange incantations. However, she maintained that she had not harmed any of the McDonald family. She felt sick when her friends were near the children, prompting her to flee the house. It is thought that the murders were not random. Helena's friends may have been motivated by revenge. The soldiers were angry that Dr. Jeffrey had refused to give them illegal substances. Helena passed a polygraph test 3 times, and her statements were validated. Despite this, her testimony was deemed unreliable. The judge imposed restrictions on providing information about Helena and her soldier friends, which became one of the obstacles for Jeffrey's defense. The defense relied on the psychological profile and personal qualities of the accused to convince the jury of his inability to commit murder. The judge allowed the use of previously collected data, but only if Jeffrey underwent another examination by a psychiatrist. This request was of course a trap, as the psychiatrist had been cooperating with the military for 8 years while the investigation was ongoing. The prosecutor's office, eager to put Jeffrey behind bars for good, asked the doctor to make a finding. After a brief interrogation, the doctor declared Jeffrey a psychopathic murderer. Ultimately, the court refused to allow the use of Jeffrey's previous psychiatric records, which had been obtained from another psychiatrist. Instead, the jury was presented with the new psychiatrist's report, which had a devastating effect on the defense. The prosecution replaced Jeffrey's rosy image with that of a true monster. The jury found Jeffrey McDonald guilty of murdering his wife, Colette, and their 2 children, Kimberly and Kristen. Sentenced him to 3 life terms. Even with this, the revenge of the military police leadership was not over. After learning that Fort Braga soldiers had a serious problem with illegal substances, the unit's leadership was unprepared for such problems, which coincided with the emergence of the burgeoning hippie movement. Under Jeffrey, the situation became more difficult for the soldiers to access, which made them unhappy. Later, some gathered to go to Jeffrey's house to take revenge. Helena's guilt was unquestionable. Even her husband, whom she married in the 80s, believed she was involved. He thought she hadn't committed murder but was likely a witness the incident. Helena shared many details about the crime scene that had never been made public at the time. The girl was present in McDonald's house on that fateful night, and this is well established. She underwent 3 polygraph tests, all supporting her account of being there. Her testimony was also recorded on video. According to her, when they entered the house, they forced Jeffrey to write a prescription for Zach, which led to a fight that resulted in the murder of Jeffrey's family members. Jeffrey was left alive, turned into a martyr. The criminals wrote death to all pigs on the wall, likely trying to imitate Charles Manson, who was widely known at that time. Helena passed away at the age of 30 due to complications from liver disease. This incident occurred in 1970, and Helena's testimony was recorded with the judge's approval. At the time of the triple murder, her boyfriend, Greg Michel, was a soldier struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder after returning from Vietnam. As a result, he started using drugs heavily and had to enter treatment once more due to his addiction. He later admitted to a friend that he was involved in the McDonald family's murder. At the crime scene, several pieces of evidence were collected, including Greg's blood and hair samples. It was noted that he was left-handed, and an independent expert determined that the knife wounds were likely made with the left hand. Additionally, he had liver issues, which prevented him from testifying during the trial. Jeffrey McDonald's fatal mistake was befriending writer Joe McGinnis. They met just before his retrial, and Jeffrey asked Joe to write a book about his case. Jeffrey believed this would give him an advantage in the upcoming hearings. Jeffrey then allowed Joe to attend all of the meetings in detail. In return, Jeffrey received a portion of the book's advance from the publisher and agreed not to contest the book's contents. The friendship between the two men grew stronger. Joe supported Jeffrey and convinced him that Joe was still defending Jeffrey's innocence. However, Joe eventually betrayed Jeffrey by portraying him as the true monster in his book. From private conversations, Joe discovered that just before the triple murder, Jeffrey had taken diet pills, which were quite strong at that time. Although this was an isolated incident, Joe exaggerated the situation, suggesting that Jeffrey was taking 3 pills daily, which could have led to a serious overdose. Joe claimed this was the cause of Jeffrey's anger and violent behavior towards his family. He even pointed to a specific incident: Jeffrey's daughter had wet his side of the bed. In a normal family, the father would not react angrily to such an incident, but Joe saw it as the reason why Jeffrey, the man who was supposed to love his family, lost control. Joe believed that, under the influence of drugs, he had gone psychotic and ended up killing an entire family. However, a toxicology test found no drugs in Jeffrey's system, only a small amount of alcohol. During the trial, Joe said he had changed his mind about Jeffrey's guilt, believing it was more financially beneficial to Jeffrey. The controversial book did significant damage to Jeffrey's reputation. As a result, support for Jeffrey's innocence dwindled. However, Jeffrey successfully sued the book's author for libel. In August 1980, Jeffrey filed a lawsuit seeking millions in damages. After several hearings, the court awarded him $325,000. While most of the compensation was placed in a trust, Jeffrey retained the right to continue his fight for justice against the author. Jeffrey's story resonated with many people. Several well-known lawyers believed in his innocence and volunteered their services to help secure his acquittal. Despite their efforts, numerous appeals were rejected in 1989. However, during the trial and the review of the court's decision, new evidence emerged that supported Jeffrey's claim of non-involvement in the triple murder, including results from examinations. Unfortunately, the same judge presided over the proceedings. This judge continued to hinder the defense team, demonstrating a lack of impartiality throughout the case. A significant breakthrough during this time was the advent of new DNA testing technologies that allowed Jeffrey's defense team to conduct their own analyses. Sadly, at this stage, the judge repeatedly obstructed the lawyers' efforts to seek justice. Information about Helena Stokely finally emerged. A video of her testimony was made available to the lawyers. By this point, Jeffrey, the wrongfully convicted man, had spent 20 years in prison but had never stopped fighting for his freedom. Meanwhile, the military prosecutor's office continued to resist, attempting to dispute all the new evidence. Additional witnesses were found, some of whom had been intimidated and coerced into supporting the prosecution. Stokely, the MacDonald family's nanny, admitted to the prosecution that she had been at the MacDonald's home during the murders. She also revealed that the prosecution had threatened to prosecute her if she testified in court, which discouraged her from speaking out. Prosecutor Blackburn was eventually convicted of several charges, including forgery, theft, and embezzlement, and was remanded in custody in January 2006. New evidence came to light, suggesting a possible retrial. First, a videotaped confession by Helena Stokely was made public, followed by the release of evidence supporting Stokely's claim. DNA testing showed that hair and tissue found on the victim did not match anyone known and belonged to a stranger. In March 2006, a man came forward to the police, claiming that he had been drinking regularly at a bar with a man who had confessed to the MacDonald murders. This man turned out to be Lena's boyfriend, Greg Mitchell. The last time he had heard details of the case was a few weeks before Greg's death. The cashier at the store near the house, Jeffrey, claimed that he saw a group of hippies enter the store the morning after the murders. They looked unkempt, were covered in blood, and were talking to each other about the crime they had committed. However, they then threatened him with his life. The cashier recognized Greg and Helena among this group. An employee at the rehabilitation center where Greg Mitchell was treated also claimed that he had repeatedly confessed to her that he had killed the Jeffrey MacDonald's wife and children, even writing his initials on the wall of the center. Unfortunately, all of this evidence was ignored by the court. 54 years have passed since the tragic murder of the MacDonald family. Defenders at the Supreme Court are still trying to prove Jeffrey's innocence by filing appeals. His most recent appeal against his conviction was in 2021, but was dismissed. Jeffrey remains in prison but still holds out hope that he will one day be free again. While in prison, he met Catherine, an activist involved in the Innocence movement, and they developed a relationship. She visited him regularly and eventually married. Catherine runs a website dedicated to Jeffrey's case, working to secure his release. The 80-year-old, who has spent most of his life in prison, argues that those who actually committed the crime are still walking free. Many of those responsible have lived their entire lives without facing justice, and some have even died without being held accountable for their actions. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Brian King and Christina Benjamin. On July 29, 1993, it was a hot day in Alice County, Texas, USA. Despite the heat, a road crew was working on Cato Road to prepare the ground for asphalt. During their break, one worker leveling gravel spotted something unusual in the thick bushes across the Smith Creek River. The object, about 100 meters away, had a grayish color that made it stand out from the surrounding greenery. Curiosity prompted the worker and a colleague to climb over a barbed wire fence to investigate the mysterious object. As they got closer, about 10 meters from the object, a foul stench hit their noses. The stench became unbearable, and they covered their noses with their clothes. As they got closer, they discovered that the object was a corpse. It appeared to be a she, probably of school age. The gruesome sight showed torn flesh covered in flies, but the most shocking aspect was that the girl's head and arms were missing. The workers quickly notified their supervisor and decided to call the police. Without cell phones and far from the nearest town, they decided to leave one worker with the body while the other went to a small neighboring town to seek help. The police arrived shortly after being notified and began examining the scene for evidence and any dismembered body parts. However, a more gruesome discovery awaited them just 300 meters away. They discovered the body of a young girl and also found the body of a young man who appeared to be about 15 years old. He was lying face down on the riverbank, about 10 meters from the bridge. Unlike the girl, he was still dressed and had not been dismembered. It appeared that he had been thrown into the river, and the current had washed him to shore. Retrieving the young man's body was much more difficult than accessing the girl's remains, so the police called the city fire department for assistance. With the help of special equipment, they were able to reach his body. Meanwhile, a team of forensic experts remained at the scene to investigate and collect evidence before it got too dark. Police worked the scene until the sun went down. They focused on the area where the bodies were found, and the medical examiner analyzed the victims. The expert determined that the first body, the girl, was that of a teenage girl who had been stabbed multiple times. She had been shot twice in the back with a .22 caliber gun, and her head had been severed from her body. It was likely with a large hunting knife or possibly an axe. The body showed numerous severe wounds on the abdomen, thighs, and genitals, with some resembling intricate hieroglyphs carved into the skin. There was a long, deep cut on the stomach, similar to those made during an autopsy. The criminal expert noted signs of extreme cruelty inside the cavity, including torn intestines and severed hands. Bruises that looked like marks from handcuffs suggested the victims had been restrained for a period before the torture started. Additionally, both of the girls' breasts had been removed. Experts believe the victims' bodies had been dead for 2 days, judging by their level of decomposition. He had been shot twice in the head with a similar weapon. There were no signs of a beating or struggle on his body. Police believe the attacker may have severed the girl's arms and head to make identification more difficult. However, he may not have realized that advanced DNA identification methods were available. However, the condition of the bodies and their decomposition could make this identification quite difficult. Forensic scientists found that the girl had been sexually assaulted. The high temperatures had caused significant decomposition, making it difficult to determine the exact details of the crime. Police believe the attack was carried out in anger or extreme hatred. However, the presence of fly larvae allowed researchers to determine a more precise time of death for both teens. The victims were tortured on the night of July 26th to 27th. To support their findings, the forensic expert consulted a forensic entomologist who studies the growth of insects on decomposing bodies and the damage they cause. Ultimately, the lab staff agreed that the time of death had been accurately determined. However, some errors regarding the timeline of the investigation had to be cleared up. Since the boy's hands and head were intact, forensic experts were puzzled as to how he escaped the same fate as the girl. They questioned why his hands were not cut off, as this would have made it easier for the criminal to conceal the victim's identity. The killer likely thought that the boy's body would be lost in the current or would drown, making it difficult to find. This might explain why he didn't dismember the body, or perhaps the body fell into the water by accident. The police believed that the dismemberment was not meant to mislead the investigation but might have been motivated by something more disturbing. Many serial killers keep trophies from their crimes. It's possible that the girl's head became part of such a gruesome collection because the attack resembled that of a maniac. The police's first goal was to find the girl's clothes. During their search, they found a clump of light-colored hair caught in the barbed wire that the workers had crossed. Police believed that this hair might have come from the decapitated victim. Unfortunately, the mutilated body had no identifying marks. However, in the boy's pocket, they found a book subscription card from a town registered to Brian King. They were able to confirm the details at the library, but it was closed for the night, so they would have to wait until morning. The next morning, the police station received a report about the disappearance of two teenagers from a small town, the same one where the library was located. The boy's name was Brian King, and the girl's name was Christina Benjamin. After receiving the report, police visited the boy's home and showed the wallet they had found to the father who answered the door. He confirmed that it belonged to his 14-year-old son, Brian, who was missing along with his 13-year-old stepdaughter, Christina, who had blonde hair. Days before the incident, around midnight, the children's father was awakened by a suspicious car that honked its horn and drove off. During this time, Brian was sleeping in a tent outside the house, which was unusual for a teenager. The car returned just 10 to 15 minutes later. The father noticed his son talking calmly with the driver and assumed it was one of Brian's friends. He spotted a man with blonde hair in the back seat but couldn't see the driver. Feeling reassured, he went to the bathroom. When he came back, the car and his son were gone. The father thought Brian had gone out with friends and planned to discuss this odd situation with him in the morning, so he went to bed. However, Brian never returned home, and it was later discovered that Christina had also disappeared. The parents started contacting friends and acquaintances of their children, but no one had seen the teenagers. The family had a younger girl who shared a room with Christina. She reported that on the night they disappeared, Brian entered their room and woke up Christina. He mentioned that some cool guys had arrived in a car and invited them to a party. Christina agreed, and they both left home together. Eventually, their parents reported the children missing to the police. They noted that before their disappearance, Christina had injured her foot during a school class. Upon further investigation, it was found that Christina's hair was on the forensic expert's desk. She had light hair, which was compared to strands found on a fence and those collected from home combs. The results showed that the hairs did not match, indicating they could belong to a likely killer, who also appeared to have light hair. With no evidence available, forensic experts had to rely on alternative methods. They discovered fibers on Brian's shoes that matched the material used in the carpets of Japanese cars. Brian's father provided a description of the car he saw, mentioning that it was dark in color. However, his description lacked detail, as he could not recall the specific model or license plate number. Police were particularly puzzled by the brutality that Christina had suffered. If this was not a personal hate crime, it would suggest they were dealing with a very dangerous person who was likely to commit further acts of violence. They speculate that the motive behind such cruelty could have been sexual. After interviewing the friends of the murdered teenagers, the police learned that on the evening of her disappearance, Christina was supposed to meet a man named Jason. All the witnesses who spoke to the police pointed to Jason Massey as the only person capable of committing such a crime. One of his friends revealed that Jason had long ago turned to a darker lifestyle. He had dropped out of school, never held a job, frequently killed animals, and kept their heads as trophies. Jason did not hide his disturbing interests. He once made a chilling comment, expressing enjoyment in saying that if a serial killer were active in the area, it would be him. Although he liked to boast about such things, people generally did not take him seriously. Jason was described as having long, curly blonde hair and was 20 years old at the time of these events. His mother was indifferent towards him, even hiding food in his room. The family frequently moved, faced evictions due to unpaid rent, and often lived in unstable conditions. Jason had a difficult childhood, living in a car and facing a harsh environment. He was addicted to alcohol and drugs, bullied weaker children and started harming animals. His father was also addicted to drugs and treated him badly. During Jason's school years, his father was incarcerated for a long time, but it had a serious impact on his mental health. Jason was involved in various petty crimes, including stalking. There was an incident where he killed a girl's dog because she rejected his advances, and he continued to stalk her, leaving her extremely scared. As a child, Jason loved his younger brother but grew to hate adults. As an adult, his feelings for women became entwined with violent fantasies. He also believed in ghosts and thought he could hear them speaking to him, influenced by religious stories told to him by his devout grandmother. The year the two teenagers were murdered, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison after a police officer discovered a dead cat and some suspicious cutting tools in his car. Unfortunately, he was released early and never faced the consequences of his actions. Police reported that when Jason was arrested, he was wearing handcuffs and appeared to be enjoying the situation. Jason did not resist arrest and confidently stated that he would be released soon. After searching his home, police found numerous newspaper clippings about the murders, a collection of adult videos, a box filled with handcuffs, and knives that had traces of blood. His room also contained books on satanic themes. In the Jason's car, a brown 1982 Subaru, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be blood stains, particularly concentrated in the trunk. They also found duct tape with light hair that did not belong to the Jason, a receipt for ammunition, a hunting knife, and a brown carpet with fibers matching those found at the crime scene. During questioning, the Jason denied any involvement in the crimes. He assumed he knew where the severed body parts were and even offered to lead the police to them. They searched the forest for several hours together but found nothing. After returning to the station, Jason requested a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the police. Soon after, the police received an anonymous tip suggesting that Jason was the only one who could be responsible for the teenagers' massacre. Later, a witness emerged who had spent much of the evening of July 26 with Jason. She stated that he had left home acting strangely aggressive, likely due to drug use. She noticed he had handcuffs and a gun, which made her uneasy, but she didn't report it to the police because she was afraid of him. The girl later said that Jason owned a .22 caliber pistol, the same type used to shoot the Brian and Christina, and that he had purchased ammunition shortly before killing the two children. DNA evidence from blood and hair found in his car matched the victims. Police gathered more and more circumstantial evidence linking Jason to the massacre, while he had no alibi. That evening, his friends and acquaintances found him strange, and some even felt afraid of him. A teacher from the school Jason attended said he was fixated on disturbing images, including satanic symbols. He often spoke about murders, which frightened some of his classmates. At that point, there was no solid evidence against him. To establish Jason's connection, the FBI was called in to create a criminal profile using photographs from the crime scene. During the investigation, it was discovered that Jason's mother had discovered several of Jason's notebooks the previous June. These notebooks contained disturbing content, including a list of girls Jason wanted to kill, with detailed descriptions of the violent acts he fantasized about. Christina was at the top of the list. The alarming nature of the diary prompted Jason's mother to seek help from a psychotherapy clinic after reading them. A psychiatrist assessed Jason and concluded that he posed a danger to himself and society, leading to his admission for intensive care and further observation. However, not all medical professionals agreed with the diagnosis of antisocial disorder. Most doctors, after conducting evaluations, opposed this diagnosis, resulting in Jason's release from the clinic without further treatment. Jason's writings became crucial evidence in the case, as they showed his obsession with thoughts of murder and torture directed at young girls for several years. He claimed that his desire to kill was motivated purely by sexual arousal. On March 17, 1994, Jason was charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, yet he maintained his innocence. 3 weeks after the charges were filed, the hearings commenced. The prosecutor's office intended to pursue the death penalty for the defendant, which is permitted under Texas law. The hearing started on September 28, 1994. The prosecution alleged that in mid-July 1993, Jason confided in a friend that he had obtained ammunition, knives, and handcuffs, and that he had devised a plan to kidnap Christina from her home. He used Brian to entice both teenagers into a car, claiming they were going to a party. Once inside, he quickly disposed of the boy and shot him in the car. Christina attempted to flee, but he injured her, caught her, and proceeded to torment her. The prosecution worried that Jason could evade justice since the public defender argued that the investigation was biased. The police focused only on Jason as a suspect after hearing about a mysterious individual, neglecting to consider other possibilities. The defense lawyer pointed out to the jury that the evidence and assumptions made by the prosecution needed further investigation. Jason's sister testified during the trial, sharing details about their challenging childhood. They often attended school unwashed, beaten, and hungry. As a result, Jason struggled to focus on his studies, despite his efforts. However, her testimony backfired when the prosecution pointed out that, despite their hardships, his sister managed to lead a decent life without committing violence. This was argued as a reason why Jason's background couldn't justify his cruel actions. The prosecution's team included a forensic expert and a forensic entomologist, who provided a thorough report on Christina's autopsy and the severe injuries she endured. Their findings indicated a brutal and unrestrained act of violence, suggesting that allowing Jason to leave the courtroom would be a grave injustice. One of the witnesses for the prosecution was Chris Nowlin, the same friend who was driving the car that transported the teenagers from their home. He chose to cooperate with the prosecution by testifying against Jason in exchange for immunity from criminal charges related to his involvement. Jason convinces his friend Chris to meet his girlfriend. Jason lies that he has been dating Christina since high school. When they reach a secluded area near a bridge, where Jason reveals his dark intentions to Chris. He plans to take Christina and Brian into the woods, kill them, and attack the girl. Chris dismisses Jason's words, as he often jokes about such things and never carries them out. Jason's former classmate testified that he had been stalking Christina for an extended period. After she rejected his advances in 7th grade, he killed her dog out of revenge and used its blood to stain her parents' car. The stalker also sent her disturbing photos of decapitated women, claiming this was how she would end up. A gun store salesman confirmed that he sold ammunition to Jason, which was later matched to the ammunition used in the murders. The day after the crime, Jason went to the wash to clean the car, but forensic experts discovered important evidence there. According to Jason's mother, he had joined a religious community shortly before the massacre, and she believed he was genuinely trying to change his ways. However, diary entries presented in court painted a different picture. They revealed that he was actually planning the crime. On the day of the hearing, a tourist was exploring the woods near where the teenagers were found murdered and stumbled upon an old, rusty refrigerator. Curious, he approached and opened the refrigerator, and was horrified to discover 30 animal skulls inside. He also found 4 red and yellow skulls in plastic bags. The skulls were accompanied by diaries written in a strange, messy handwriting, titled The Book of Murders. The diaries, which began in 1989 and ended on the day of the 1993 murders of Christina and Brian, detailed his grisly experiments with animals and outlined his plans for Christina, which he then carried out exactly as described. He had previously made attempts to commit murder but had failed, which frustrated him. His violent urges were partly driven by his hatred for his mother and a desire to kill her. Additionally, his grandmother often told him stories about demons, which may have shaped his thoughts. This evidence led the prosecutor's office to conclude that Christina's murder was premeditated. Jason described himself as a killing machine in his diaries. After both the prosecution and defense delivered their closing statements, the jury began deliberating the verdict. After 3 hours, they found Jason Massey guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The next step was to evaluate the aggravating and mitigating circumstances to determine whether the death penalty was appropriate. The prosecution presented evidence from Jason's own diary, which detailed his gruesome actions, including the murders of 4 cats, 7 dogs, and numerous calves. He had a disturbing obsession with collecting animal heads as trophies. Testimonies from a few of Jason's friends revealed that he viewed acts of cruelty as a display of power and wanted to showcase it. The diary entries also indicated that he had no intention of stopping his violent behavior. One of his last entries expressed a desire to become the most notorious serial killer in the United States, claiming that he planned to kill over the next 20 years. It took the jury just 15 minutes to decide on the death penalty for Jason Massey on October 12, 1994. After the verdict was announced, the judge stated that executing Jason was a more humane option than what he had done to his victims. When Jason was taken to death row, he claimed that he had placed Christina's hands and head in a pillowcase along with her clothes and thrown them into the river. However, police were skeptical of his account, as he often kept trophies from his crimes. Jason was shocked by the conviction. He was determined to fight the verdict, so his lawyer filed an appeal on his behalf. Many advocates, including a Canadian coalition against the death penalty, spoke out in his support. Human rights advocates argued that the death penalty was inhumane and criticized the investigation, claiming that it was poorly conducted and ignored other potential suspects who were in the car during the kidnapping of Christina and Brian. Despite their efforts, their actions were ultimately in vain. On the evening of April 3, 2001, Jason was led to the execution chamber. For his last meal, he chose chicken legs, fried pumpkin, fried eggplant, mashed potatoes, green peas, boiled cabbage, corn, spinach with cheese, caramel fudge, pecans, ice cream, and a pot of sweet tea. Before his execution, Jason spoke to the victims' families, expressing his remorse for his actions. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Gabrielle Uchlaki. Friendship during youth is very important. However, finding a true friend for life can be challenging. Sometimes, people may appear friendly but have hidden selfish motives or even darker intentions. It's not always easy to recognize these signs, and failing to do so can lead to serious consequences. Gabrielle lives in a cozy little town in Nevada, USA. The local economy relies heavily on the mining industry, which provides jobs and supports families. Gabrielle's family moved here from Colorado Springs. Her father Jim had planned to find work in the gold mines. The family was excited about their new life, believing that the town was perfect for them and everything seemed to be going well. Gabrielle was immediately drawn to this vibrant atmosphere. She loved the beautiful natural surroundings, horseback riding and ATV riding, while some consider these activities more suited to boys. This added to Gabrielle's appeal as an active and adventurous young woman. Gabrielle has a close bond with her brother James, who is only a year older than her. They spend a lot of time playing game. Their family, united and loving, always supports each other through difficult times. Even when their parents decided to divorce, they handled the situation calmly to protect their children from emotional distress. After the divorce, both parents maintained a friendly relationship and resolved issues related to property division and child custody without conflict. After the divorce, her mother, Alicia, moved away but chose to live nearby so they could co-parent. Both parents took turns caring for Gabrielle and James and maintained open communication, which helped ease the emotional impact of the divorce on the children. This approach allowed Gabrielle to grow into a strong and intelligent young woman. She became very independent and faced challenges without fear. From a young age, Gabrielle helped her parents with housework. By the age of 16, Gabrielle was skilled at horseback riding, herding cattle, and helping on the farm, and was admired by her family and neighbors for her diligence and professionalism. She was cheerful and easy to get along with. After finishing school, Gabrielle plans to attend college to study psychiatry and help people struggling with mental disorders. Gabrielle has always been empathetic to the pain of others, which is what led her to pursue this career path. However, in 2020, Gabrielle faced bullying at school. Her best friend noted that many of her classmates suddenly turned against her that year for no apparent reason. This friend suspected that envy and jealousy were the main causes, as many girls were jealous of Gabrielle's beauty and intelligence and targeted her for bullying. Eventually, Gabrielle had to switch schools, but she remained optimistic. She had a small group of close friends who truly loved and supported her. Gabrielle started to spend more time on horse racing, where she met others who shared her interests. One of them was Bryce Dickey, who was a couple of years older than her. They quickly became friends, and Gabrielle often referred to him as an older brother. However, it seemed that Bryce wanted something more than friendship. He spent a lot of time with her, and she got along well with his family. Bryce was known to be a kind and polite young man who, like Gabrielle, was always willing to help those in need. Gabrielle and Bryce became close friends because of their similar personalities. They made plans to meet up, as they often did. That day, Gabrielle was at her father's house, where he was practicing with his rock band. She was eager to spend time with her father. She was chatting happily with the band members and even invited Bryce to watch. Unfortunately, Bryce missed practice. Bryce then plans to pick Gabrielle up by car to his house to watch a movie and promises to drop her off later. When her father Jim got home around 7:30 p.m., he discovered that Gabrielle was not home. He searched the house, calling her name, but received no response. Worried, Jim tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This was unusual, as Gabrielle was usually responsible. She was never late, and it seemed unlikely that she would forget to come home on time. The worried father called Gabrielle's brother James, but he also had no idea where she was. Jim then called Bryce to ask about his daughter. Bryce told Jim that after driving around the city for a few hours, Bryce dropped Gabrielle off near the school, where she met a guy he didn't recognize. Bryce then left to avoid interrupting their conversation. Jim asked Bryce again why they didn't go to the movie as planned. Bryce explained that he and Gabrielle had simply changed plans and decided to drive along country roads. Naturally, Jim was anxious to know who Gabrielle had met, but Bryce couldn't provide any details. He described the man as a tall, blond young man with the appearance of a cowboy. Jim was surprised by Bryce's words. He didn't understand who this stranger was or why Bryce would leave Gabrielle with a stranger instead of taking her home as planned. Bryce had always made sure to take care of Gabrielle, so this behavior seemed unusual. Bryce was very worried about what had happened. He felt guilty for not taking Gabrielle home, explaining that she had asked him to leave. Bryce now realized that the situation could be serious and that something might have happened to her. He remembered that the stranger was driving an old RD F-150 pickup truck. This only added to the family's worries, as none of her friends owned such a vehicle. Gabrielle's family tried calling her hundreds of times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Concerned, her parents decided to contact the police. However, as usual, the police assumed that Gabrielle had probably just run away or gone out with friends and would return soon. However, her parents knew that this was not normal for Gabrielle. She had very few friends and none of them knew where she was. Gabrielle had no family problems, addictions, or mental health concerns, and there had been no recent conflicts. To her family, her sudden disappearance was a clear indication that something serious had happened. The sheriff realized the seriousness of the situation. He gathered all the information available from Gabrielle's friends and acquaintances. The police then contacted Bryce to request a meeting near the school where Gabrielle had gone missing, to provide details about what happened after he dropped her off. Bryce said that he had spent the day with Gabrielle and that they had been driving around the Spring Creek area in his car. However, during their outing, his father called unexpectedly and asked him to come home immediately to help with some errands. Understanding the situation, Gabrielle agreed to reschedule their trip for the next day, but she asked to be dropped off near the school. She also mentioned that she wanted to meet her new friend, Jetty. Bryce reported that after Gabrielle exited his car, she walked directly towards a green pickup truck where a white man in a cowboy hat was sitting. He observed her but then drove off, unsure if she entered a stranger's vehicle. The Bryce had a poor recollection of the details and did not note the pickup truck's license plate. During the conversation, the police found no reason to suspect Bryce. He seemed innocent, so they decided to release him and continue investigating other clues. The police wanted to draw public attention to the case using the media, believing that someone might have seen the man in the cowboy hat and driving the green pickup truck. Initially, the police focused on identifying the license plate number. Additionally, the sheriff contacted the phone service provider to determine the last known location of Gabrielle's cell phone. They discovered that her phone had been active near the school where Bryce had dropped her off. As a result, the police rushed to that location in hopes of finding new evidence, but they found nothing suspicious there. Gabrielle's family and friends continued to search the streets, hoping to find any clues to her whereabouts in the city and surrounding areas. They distributed and posted more than 500 flyers, but local residents remained unresponsive and there were no new leads for the investigation. It felt as if Gabrielle had disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Gabrielle's mother Alicia created a social media group to share updates and information about the search, but the effort yielded no results. Then, out of the blue, she received a text message from an unknown number. The sender claimed to have kidnapped Gabrielle and demanded a $25 ransom, threatening to harm her if Alicia did not pay. After some time, the kidnappers sent another text message, saying that Gabrielle was sick and would die without the medicine. The kidnapper insisted that he would only provide the medicine if he received the money he demanded. Initially, the parents agreed to the kidnapper's demands, but they decided to contact the police first. Alicia called the police to report the situation. They quickly asked her to come to the station so they could trace the phone number. It seemed that the investigation had turned up an important lead. While police were trying to track down the phone number used by the kidnapper, one of the search team leaders contacted the police. He informed them that volunteers were searching about 20 kilometers from the city when they discovered a puddle of what appeared to be dried blood on the side of the road. The search team got out of their vehicles and began searching the area, where they eventually discovered a blue tarp in the bushes. Underneath, they found the body of a girl lying face down, her clothes matching Gabrielle's description. One of the police officers entered the office and announced that the interview with Alicia would have to be postponed because they had to go to the scene where the body was discovered. Alicia began to cry, and upon arriving at the scene she identified Gabrielle. Forensic experts determined that Gabrielle had been raped, as her pants and underwear were pulled down to her ankles. She had been strangled and her throat had been slit. Which was the cause of death? Police found Gabrielle's headphones tangled in a nearby tree branch. They also found a used condom and its packaging near her body. This provided a clue to the investigation. Police wanted to learn more about Jetty, Gabrielle's new acquaintance, but no one could provide specific details about him. Finding this individual became a top priority. Gabrielle's family received significant support from social networks, with Bryce being particularly notable. He maintained close contact with Gabrielle's mother, father, and brother, offering help and expressing his sorrow. He described Gabrielle as a bright person and a close friend he would never forget. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation by obtaining warrants to search the Gabrielle's computer and mobile phone. They also needed to analyze the evidence they had collected, including DNA found on a condom, which was crucial for solving the case. It was suspected that Gabrielle might have been targeted by an internet predator with a history of sexual violence. The police quickly created and reviewed a list of registered sex offenders in the area who might have been connected to the incident. To identify the criminal, all the information needed to be compared. However, this process took a long time, causing the investigation to drag on. Meanwhile, the police quickly checked the information from the kidnapper. They were able to trace the phone number that called the Alicia to demand a ransom. Unfortunately, this number was not registered in Nevada. It was a hidden number bought online, making it impossible to track. The police first wanted to identify Jetty, who was considered the prime suspect in the case. After obtaining information from Gabrielle's phone, the police quickly located him. However, they were disappointed to discover that Jetty was in Alaska at the time of Gabrielle's death. Although they had met shortly before the incident and had planned to meet again, he was not the one who raped and murdered her. He had an alibi. He had not left Alaska during that time. The police decided to investigate all other people with similar initials, driving similar cars, and living in the city, surrounding areas, and near where the body was found. They were only able to identify two young men driving a green pickup truck, but both had alibis, as they were far away at the time of the murder. This stalled the investigation. The police then contacted Gabrielle's family again, hoping to get new information. Alicia said that in the weeks before her death, Gabrielle had been dating a guy who was pursuing a cowboy lifestyle, living on a ranch and competing in rodeos. They quickly broke up because Gabrielle wasn't ready for intimacy. After the breakup, they remained friends, but during some nasty arguments, he made extreme comments about wanting her dead. After verifying his alibi, it seems the investigation has stalled once again. However, the police took one last approach to identifying the suspect. They decided to review all the city's surveillance camera footage, specifically looking for a green pickup truck driven by a cowboy. Fortunately, there were several high-quality cameras along the route Gabrielle took before her death and captured clear images. Police had to analyze multiple videos that had been recorded. Despite their efforts, they were unable to find the green pickup truck that Bryce had mentioned. However, police did find something interesting. The blue Chevy pickup that Bryce himself drove really was on the recording. He did not stop or let anyone out, which suggests that he lied about the green pickup truck. The police then decided to trace the route the blue pickup took. Bryce had previously claimed he had been driving around the area with his girlfriend for several hours, but this was proven false by the video evidence. The police decided to request data from Bryce's cell phone to compare his geographic location with that of the assault victim. They quickly obtained a warrant to access this data, and did not notify him to avoid alerting a new suspect. It was clear that he had been with Gabrielle all day, because their movements matched until her cell phone turned off. Additionally, he was present at the location where Gabrielle's body was discovered before returning home. This indicated that Bryce was present at the crime scene and may have committed or witnessed the crime. To verify the assumption, an examination was conducted. The Bryce was immediately asked to undergo tests and provide DNA samples. He agreed. He was later released, but the police did not reveal their suspicions. Instead, they acted as if everything was normal and collected samples from everyone in the area. Skin particles were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, and these samples matched Bryce's DNA. It was clear that he had sex with Gabrielle, but everything happened involuntarily. Bryce was called in for questioning again. Bryce agreed to be questioned without hesitation, remaining calm and confident. The police asked him if he had ever had a relationship with Gabrielle, especially sexual. He denied these allegations, claiming that he considered her like a younger sister. Bryce's statements raised suspicion because if he was telling the truth, his DNA would not have been present at the crime scene. However, police discovered a condom containing his semen at the scene of the murder. Feeling that the police were onto something, Bryce changed his story, claiming that Gabrielle had flirted with him and that they had consensual oral sex while using a condom. Bryce later stuck to his story about a man in a green pickup truck, repeatedly claiming that he could not provide a clear description of the cowboy or the truck's license plate. However, multiple traces of Bryce's DNA were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, in her private parts, and even on her neck, near the fatal stab wound. Additionally, based on Bryce's movements and the surveillance camera footage, it was confirmed that he did not stop anywhere else. This indicated that he was lying. Under pressure from the police, Bryce eventually confessed that what happened to Gabrielle was an accident. He mentioned that she wanted to have rough sex with a knife and in a moment of passion, the blade accidentally stabbed her. This explanation seems very unlikely, especially given his history of dishonesty. Bryce Dickey, 18, was arrested on March 19, 2020. Following his arrest, police searched his home and vehicle. At Bryce's home, police discovered several bloody items in his closet, including a knife that was determined to be the murder weapon. In the trunk of his car, they found a bloody sweatshirt with Gabrielle's blood on it, along with multiple fingerprints and DNA samples linking Bryce to the crime. When Gabrielle's family received the news, they were completely stunned. Her family had always considered Bryce a good young man and he had treated them like family, considering him Gabrielle's best friend. The family had trusted Bryce as if he were their own, not knowing that he would betray them in such a terrible way. While the townspeople saw him as the true cowboy and a good person who would help others in times of need, he was actually hiding his true nature. Gabrielle's family trusted him. He made sure she got home safely and gave her regular rides, which seemed thoughtful. However, his intentions were not noble. He was actually trying to get close to his victim. In May 2022, the prosecution presented several credible testimonies, including testimony from Bryce's ex-girlfriend. She described him as aggressive and cruel, often getting into arguments. She recounted that he had choked her at least 4 times during their conflicts, with the last incident being so severe that she felt she was on the verge of death. She ended her relationship with Bryce, who had been stalking and threatening her for a long time. It was only when her parents threatened to call the police that he stopped. The jury then deliberated for about an hour and unanimously found Bryce Dickey guilty of first-degree murder and rape. The judge sentenced Bryce Dickey to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. He received an additional 20 years for using a deadly weapon, another 20 years for kidnapping, and 10 more years for rape. In total, he will serve 70 years before he can seek release. Bryce did not explain his motive for the crime. However, a friend of Gabrielle's revealed that just days before the murder, Bryce confessed his love to her, but she suggested they remain friends. Police believe that Bryce could not handle the rejection and felt resentful. When he learned that Gabrielle was seeing a new boyfriend named Jetty, he became angry and sought revenge. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Kenya Monge. Kenia Monge was born in 1992 in Honduras. Her mother, Maria, was only 15 at the time. A year later, Maria left Kenya with her grandmother and moved to America alone in search of a better life. In America, Maria met Anthony Lee, whom she married, and they had 2 children together. 10 years later, in 2004, Maria brought Kenia from Honduras to join their family in Aurora, Colorado. East of Denver, the family welcomed Kenia warmly, and she quickly began calling Anthony Dad. Initially, Kenia struggled with English, but she found it easy to learn and soon improved her skills. Growing up in a poor country, she appreciated the opportunities in America after finishing high school. Kenia enrolled in a local college in Denver to study broadcasting. In 2010, at the age of 19, she moved out of her parents' home and into an apartment with her boyfriend. Since she and her friends were not yet old enough to enter bars and clubs, they used fake IDs to gain access to nightclubs. Her parents were unaware of this and would never have guessed that their daughter was breaking the law. However, Kenia could not foresee the consequences of her next trip to a nightclub with a fake ID. On Thursday, March 31, 2011, 19-year-old Kenia went to a nightclub in downtown Denver with 2 new friends. They spent time together and drank alcohol. Kenia, who was 155 meters tall and weighed about 40 kilos, quickly began to feel the effects of the drinks. At one point, she told her friends she needed to go to the bathroom. She left her purse, phone, and keys on the table, however, after going to the restroom. She never returned. Her friends assumed she had drunk too much and went home without worrying about her, continuing to enjoy their time at the club before leaving. The next morning, Friday, April 1, Kenia's boyfriend Louis became concerned when she hadn't come home. He hadn't received any calls or messages from her, although Kenia often walked home alone at night. She always returned with him. Louis contacted Kenia's sister, but she was unaware of Kenia's whereabouts. He then asked her to reach out to their parents. They also didn't know where Kenia was. The parents left work to search for her. Calling all her friends and acquaintances, they learned that Kenia had been out that night with girls she had only recently met. These girls later visited Kenia's parents, claiming they had been at the club using fake identification. The girls stated that the last time they saw Kenia was around midnight when she went to the restroom and didn't come back. They brought Kenia's purse with them and gave it to her parents, who immediately sensed that something was wrong since their daughter would never leave her belongings unattended for long. Upon examining the purse, they found a new text message on Kenia's phone that read, "Hello, this is Travis, the guy who gave you a ride last night in a white creepy van. Did you get home okay?" The message was from a number not saved in Kenia's contacts. Anthony believed that Travis might know where Kenia was and attempted to call the number, but there was no answer. Afterward, the parents contacted the police to report their daughter missing. The officer they spoke to seemed unconcerned, suggesting that Kenia would likely return soon, and told them to wait 72 hours before officially reporting her as missing. The following day, Saturday, April 2, Travis returned the call. He explained that he had seen Kenia on the street near the club around 2:03 a.m. Talking to a homeless man, Travis said he offered her help, but Kenia mentioned she needed to retrieve her car parked near another club. He described her as very drunk, which is why he offered her a ride to her car. They went to the club, but couldn't find her car. Travis offered to give Kenia a ride home. He said she gave him the address of her apartment, which she shared with her boyfriend. Travis recognized the address because he worked at a nearby bakery. On the way to Kenia's apartment, she mentioned needing to buy cigarettes, so they stopped at a gas station, but it was closed. Kenia then noticed an Asian man named Dan standing nearby. Smoking a cigarette, she approached him, and he gave her a cigarette. They began talking in Spanish, and then they left together. Leaving Travis behind, he got into his car and drove away, never seeing Kenia again. After hearing this story, Anthony found it strange and unsettling. He thanked Travis for sharing the information, and their conversation ended. The stepfather then called the police again to report what Travis had said, urging them to file a missing person report. However, the police refused because not enough time had passed since Kenya's disappearance. Frustrated, Anthony called Travis again to ask for more details about that night. Travis suggested they meet at the gas station where he last saw Kenya. Anthony agreed and took a gun with him. He then went to meet Maria. She pleaded with him not to go, but he ignored her concerns. Worried, Maria called the police to inform them of the situation. They agreed to send a police officer to their meeting place when the officer arrived at the gas station. Travis was already there with a friend and the officer. Travis recounted the same story, speaking convincingly and sincerely. However, Anthony doubted that his daughter wouldn't walk around the city at night with strangers. The officer also found the story suspicious. He separated the men and asked them questions. While talking to Travis, the officer noticed a strong smell of bleach coming from a nearby white van. He informed the officer, who then approached the van and confirmed the smell. The police officer asked Travis for permission to look inside the van, which he granted. Upon opening the back door, the officer saw a pristine interior with brand new carpeting. In contrast, the front seats were cluttered with food wrappers and debris, raising the officer's suspicions. However, it wasn't enough evidence to detain Travis later. He approached Anthony, crying and apologizing for leaving the girl alone that night. They shook hands and parted ways. At that moment, the handshake felt intense, and Anthony noticed Travis's hand was shaking. It was then Anthony realized that he was not just a random person. On Monday, April 4, just 4 days after Kenya went missing, the police began actively searching for her. By that time, her family and friends had already created and distributed flyers to people passing by. They also put up posters in public areas asking for assistance in locating the 19-year-old student. On April 6, Travis, 31-year-old, was brought to the Denver police station for formal questioning. During the interrogation, he recounted the same story he had previously told Anthony and a police officer at a gas station on April 2. He claimed that after breaking up with Kenya that night, he went home to his girlfriend, Carrie Humphrey, arriving at her place around 3 a.m. on the morning of April 1. He left for work at 8:03 a.m. The owner of the bakery from which Travis rented space was concerned when she discovered the security cameras were not functioning on the morning of April 2. Upon reviewing the footage, she found that the cameras had been turned off on April 1 at approximately 7:03 p.m. The last person recorded by the cameras was Travis, who was wearing latex gloves. The bakery owner stated that Travis was not scheduled to work on April 1. Detectives reviewed the surveillance footage before the cameras were turned off and saw Travis moving a cart with a large white refrigerator wrapped in tape. Later, he was captured on camera carrying a roll of carpet into the bakery. He returned to his van with what looked like a bottle of bleach and turned off the bakery's cameras. Detectives interviewed nearby business owners, and one reported that on the evening of April 1, they witnessed 2 men setting fire to a large barrel behind the bakery, with a white van parked close by. When the bakery owner asked Travis about the fire, he claimed he was burning illegal marijuana. He also stated that he switched off the cameras because he was changing his clothes. The owner noticed that Travis had a cut on his arm. He told her he had spent the night in his van and was attacked by a homeless man while he was sleeping. She said, after Kenya went missing, Travis began to behave oddly. One day, he informed her that he would soon have to change his name and flee the country because a girl had ruined his life. Detectives investigating the disappearance of Kenya examined the background of Travis. They discovered that, at the age of 17, he was charged with breaking into 16 homes and businesses in Colorado, stealing cash and goods worth over $15. During a police search of Travis's room, officers found torn women's underwear in his closet, marked with the letter M in black marker, so he was convicted and sentenced to 9 years in prison. But instead of serving time, he was sent to a military camp. However, He spent only 2 months there before being expelled and placed on probation a year later. While still on probation, Travis was arrested again for criminal harassment the following year. In 1999, he was caught with a knife. He also violated his curfew 43 times, which resulted in his transfer to a correctional facility in 2004. He faced charges for throwing rocks at women in Highlands Ranch, Colorado, for which he pleaded guilty and served 1 month in prison. Additionally, there are reports that Travis struggled with addictive and stole medications from dental clinics at the time of Kenya's disappearance. He was on probation for domestic violence charges. A detective, after reviewing Travis's history, concluded that he had a deep-seated hatred for women. 2 of Travis's ex-girlfriends, who had close relationships with him, claimed that he enjoyed hurting them and even expressed delight while doing so. Their accounts received widespread media attention in Colorado and beyond. A month after Kenya went missing, he took a friend's car without permission and drove to Austin, Texas, leading the friend to report the carjacking. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Travis's girlfriend, Carrie, who he claimed was with him from 3 a.m. to 8:3 a.m. on April 1. Carrie confirmed they had slept together, but investigators later checked Travis's cell phone and found, at that time, he was actually in Kingsburg, a small town about 40 miles northeast of Denver. Over the next 5 months, police conducted 12 searches in Kingsburg using foot patrols, horseback, and helicopters to comb through ditches and bodies of water, but they found no evidence. On May 4, Travis was arrested in Austin on suspicion of carjacking after leaving Colorado in his friend's car. The detective assigned to the Kenya case traveled to Austin and interrogated him for 3 hours, particularly focusing on security camera footage from the bakery. Travis recounted his activities on April 1, claiming he burned the remains of moldy illegal marijuana in a barrel near his workplace. When asked if he had sexual relations with Kenya in his van, he refused to answer and requested a lawyer. On June 30th, Travis was extradited back to Colorado after his DNA was collected. His friend dropped the car theft charges against him, leading to his release. Once back in Colorado, Travis moved in with his father in his hometown of Fort Collins. Meanwhile, detectives kept a close watch on him. They discovered that he frequently visited nightclubs and bars and noted an incident on July 1 where he was stopped by the police for being heavily intoxicated and shouting loudly. After speaking with a local officer, he calmed down, and the detectives observed him for 3 more days before stopping their surveillance. On the evening of July 4, 2011, just 4 days after returning to Colorado, Travis went to downtown Fort Collins, where fireworks were scheduled to take place at the same time. 30-year-old Lydia Tillman was out for a walk in the city center. Lydia had moved to Colorado earlier in 2011 and was unfamiliar with the area. She had previously worked as a sommelier in New York. After a walk, Lydia headed back to her apartment, unaware that she was being followed. Once she reached her home, Travis forcibly entered her apartment, raped her, and choked her. He then physically assaulted her, despite her efforts to fight back by kicking and scratching. Travis overpowered her to his size and strength. Eventually, she ceased resistance before leaving. He poured bleach on her naked body. When her apartment burned down, Lydia managed to escape by jumping out of the second-floor window. By that time, emergency services, including the fire department, police, and ambulance, had already arrived. She was taken to the hospital, and in here, she revealed that she did not know the man who had attacked her. Unfortunately, she suffered a stroke soon after and fell into a coma for 5 weeks. The police found no evidence at the crime scene, as it was covered in bleach and burnt materials. However, investigators were able to collect microscopic DNA from under Lydia's fingernails, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Detectives, noting the presence of bleach at the scene, suspected that Travis might be involved in the attack on Lydia, prompting them to resume active surveillance of him. Travis spent his evenings wandering the city center, avoiding bars and simply observing women. On the morning of July 10, officers saw him speaking with a girl on the street for about 30 minutes when they noticed them about to leave together. An officer approached Travis and asked him questions. He appeared nervous and claimed his name was Travis Kennedy, but he had no identification, phone number, and memory of his address by that time. The girl had left. The officers had to let him go. About 20 minutes later, Travis came back into the detective's view. He having changed his t-shirt and put on a cap. He then spotted a drunk woman and approached her around 3 a.m. on July 11. Travis was arrested for providing a false name to the police later that evening. At 10:45 p.m., he was just minutes away from posting bail when forensic scientists reported that DNA found under the victim Lydia's fingernails matched his 100%. Following this revelation, Travis was taken into custody for the assault on Lydia Tillman. On August 26, Travis expressed his willingness to reveal what really happened on April 1st with Kenya Monge. However, he requested that he not be sentenced to prison as a sex offender or face the death penalty. He claimed that on that night, he and a friend encountered Kenya is drunk alone outside a nightclub where she was speaking to a homeless man. Travis's friend approached her to offer assistance, and they attempted to call her a taxi when no taxi was available. They decided to drive her home in Travis's van. Travis dropped his friend off near his house and driving Kenya to her apartment. At this time, she passed out. Travis stopped the car and climbed on top of Kenya. He was seeking sex, but Kenya woke up and began to resist. In response, he strangled her to death. He then placed her body in a refrigerator inside his van and sealed it with duct tape. He decided to dispose of her body in Keensburg, where he dug a shallow grave under a group of cottonwood trees near the road. Upon returning to the bakery, Travis cleaned the inside of his van with bleach and burned all the items Kenya had touched. On September 7, 2011, 5 months after Kenya went missing, Travis, along with his lawyer and detectives, went to Keensburg to show them where he had buried Kenya's body. When they arrived, Travis broke down in tears. The grave was about 3 feet deep, and Kenya was found lying in a fetal position, covered with a tarp. On September 26, 2011, Travis Forbes was convicted in connection with the Kenya Monge case and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Shortly afterwards, Lydia Tillman, who was emerging from a coma, wrote a statement against Travis, so he was also found guilty of assaulting Lydia and received a 48-year prison sentence in addition to his life sentence for Kenya's murder. On October 5, 2011, Travis's girlfriend, Carrie, was arrested for allegedly giving false testimony, as she had claimed that Travis was with her on the night Kenya was killed. On September 14, 2012, Carrie was sentenced to 60 days in jail and 4 years of supervised probation, along with 2 hours of community service, and Lydia is a resilient individual who has nearly returned to her previous life, despite suffering significant injuries from the attack. She works, drives, practices yoga, travels, and lives independently. In 2014, she graduated from the Indian Yoga College in Los Angeles. Since then, she has moved back to Colorado to teach yoga full-time and assist the police department by offering self-defense classes for women. The Monge family established the Kenya Monge Foundation to support women who are victims of violence. The foundation provides emotional, physical, and financial assistance to those in need. The case of Travis Forbes, marked by his horrific actions against Kenya Monge and Lydia Tillman, serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact that violence can have on individuals and their families. The conviction of Travis by the justice system brought justice to the victims and their families. Although the emotional scars remain, his life sentence ensures that he will face the consequences of his crimes for the rest of his life. This case highlights the importance of vigilance and support systems in preventing such tragedies from occurring in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jenna Burley. Jenna Burley was born on November 4, 1994 in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the state capital. Her parents, who had a strong marriage, met while studying at the University of Pennsylvania and have been together ever since. Jenna grew up in a loving environment from a large Catholic family. She loves animals and has a strong desire to help not only her younger siblings, but also others in need, which has motivated her to participate in various volunteer activities. Jenna is a kind, cheerful, and sociable girl. In August 2013, Jenna graduated from high school and chose to attend college in Florida. She was accepted to Temple University, where she quickly became involved in campus life. Jenna joined the women's community, fighting for girls' rights for her. This was an exciting new chapter in her life. She maintained a close relationship with her family and visited them regularly during winter holidays. Enjoying skiing in her hometown, however, at the age of 19, she had a serious accident while skiing and broke her leg. The injury required surgery to install a pin and a brace. After several surgeries, Jenna tried her best to regain her mobility, but the recovery process was difficult. Eventually, Jenna decided to return to school. Complications arose that required her to be hospitalized. This was a difficult time for Jenna, as the previously active and energetic girl lost the ability to move on her own and was confined to a wheelchair. During this time, she became closer to her friends and family. She also started writing her own blog. In 2014, she published many articles that addressed many social issues and life in a positive way. Jenna aspired to be a designer or ecologist and shared her interests on social media. By 2015, she had realized her long-held dream of creating designer jewelry. She opened a small online store and donated 20% of her earnings to charity. After her trauma, Jenna struggled with her mental health, experiencing a significant depressive episode that led to a stay in a psychiatric hospital. During this time, she wrote about her battle with depression, anxiety, and attention deficit disorder on her blog. Determined not to waste her time recovering at her parents' house, she focused on her studies and graduated from a local college in Montgomery in 2015. Throughout this time, she kept in touch with friends and slowly began to heal. In the fall of 2017, Jenna returned to Temple University to study film and communications, a field she had previously dropped out of due to trauma. However, she transferred to the Philadelphia campus, a city known for its high crime rate. The only safe places were student dorms, and walking around the city after dark was dangerous. Despite the dangers, students often ignored curfews and enjoyed their free time like normal young people. Jenna worked in a store while pursuing her design interests. Unfortunately, she faced a number of setbacks, including a car accident during her first week of school. Fortunately, she suffered only minor injuries and did not require surgery. Her father came to help her with the car after the accident, which occurred on August 30, 2017. The next day, Jenna had some early morning classes, so she decided to stay in school. That Wednesday, her roommate, Davis Train, was throwing a birthday party for a friend. The party coincided with Wild Wednesday, a college tradition that the university community celebrates every week on Wednesdays. Students usually gather at local bars after class to enjoy the evening. Since Jenna's father was visiting, he spent the evening at a restaurant with her before taking her to the party with her friends. It was Jenna's first Wild Wednesday, and she was excited to be a part of it. Jenna spent the evening with several classmates and went to several bars with them. The last place Jenna was seen that night was a sports bar just a block away from the college campus. The small bar was packed with students. She was there with friends, including Davis. He left around midnight, but had planned to meet Jenna after she finished partying. However, she never showed up. Around 1 in the morning, as the bar was about to close, the group of drunk students began to disperse after returning home. Davis fell asleep while waiting for Jenna to call. When he woke up in the middle of the night and realized Jenna wasn't home, he began to worry. He rushed to his phone and saw several messages from Jenna, including one asking for help, which scared him. He quickly responded, but his message remained unread. Jenna did not return his calls, and since the bar was closed, he thought she might have returned to campus in a taxi. However, Jenna was still missing. He tried calling other students who had been with her that night, but most were either asleep or unaware of what had happened. From the comments of his friends, Davis realized that Jenna was in danger on the streets of Philadelphia. Concerned, he decided to contact Jenna's parents. They understood the seriousness of the situation. Jenna's father began searching for her throughout the night, but unfortunately, his efforts were in vain. Around 9 a.m., the father went to the university's campus security services to ask for help in finding his daughter, Jenna, who had just started her first semester. Unfortunately, the staff was hesitant to take his concerns seriously. They were used to students going missing after a night of partying almost every week, and most of them returned home after sleeping at friends' houses. Concerned parents were advised to wait at least a day, hoping that their daughter would return on her own. Those 24 hours were a long time for Jenna's family. The father hoped that Jenna would come home, or at least call. But his phone remained silent. The next day, he contacted university security again. Officers finally responded to his report, worried. They first reviewed the recordings from the campus surveillance cameras. They discovered that Jenna had not returned to her dorm that night. Officers began interviewing friends and acquaintances of Jenna's who had been with her at the bar. Through these conversations, they learned what she had been wearing on the night of her disappearance. It was clear that Jenna had disappeared off campus, in an area not covered by university security. As a result, the police were brought in to assist in the case. They worked together to investigate the circumstances surrounding Jenna's disappearance. A text message Jenna sent to Davis was alarming. It said she needed help, but did not provide any specific details. The police quickly realized the seriousness of the situation and that they needed to act quickly. They began tracking the geolocation data of Jenna's cell phone. The last time it was active was at a bar around 2 a.m. When Jenna sent a text message to Davis, the police went to the bar to talk to the bartender. An employee recognized Jenna from a photo the police showed him. He reported that she had been sitting at a table until closing time after her friends left. She spent most of the time alone. Looking upset, it seemed like she was waiting for someone or hoping for a response to her text. As she kept checking her phone, unfortunately, it seemed she didn't get any messages. At around 1:30 a.m., a muscular stranger approached her, whispered something in her ear, and sat down at her desk. They drank and began talking. At 2 a.m., the bar closed, the stranger left, and Jenna followed him. The man had probably offered to help her, to give her a ride to school. Jenna probably felt like she had no choice but to accept. The bartender noticed that they were both quite drunk, but neither of them were aggressive or tried to force her to do anything. The bar's surveillance footage corroborated the bartender's story. The police spoke to other employees, and one bartender recognized the man as a regular named Joshua Hupperters. He even had Joshua's phone number. With this information, the police quickly called Joshua, who was likely the last person Jenna had contact with. However, he did not answer, so they left him a voicemail about the situation. The police wanted to speak to him directly, as he could provide important information about Jenna's whereabouts and was an important witness to the investigation. The police began searching for him to ask questions, checking all nearby hospitals and locations where Jenna might be, but she was nowhere to be found. Joshua eventually called the police back after receiving their voicemail. He apologized, explaining that he had slept most of the day after a night at the bar. He claimed that he had had too much to drink. He also did not remember whether he had been drinking alone or buying drinks for others. He did not remember who he spent time with that night. When questioned about Jenna, Joshua claimed that he did not know with Jenna. He tried to convince the police that he did not know who they were referring to. The bartender later confirmed that Joshua was not drunk enough to forget what happened in the bar. Although they had consumed quite a bit of alcohol, they were still on their feet and able to move around, making amnesia unlikely. Joshua buying drinks for Jenna suggests that he may have had an interest in her. Police discovered that he lived just a few minutes' walk from the bar. Police easily located the room he was renting, but had difficulty when Joshua would not open the door. They contacted the apartment owner, who quickly assisted the police by using her key to let them into the room Joshua was staying in. Upon entering the room, the police found Joshua's room to be quite messy, filled with all kinds of papers and documents. During the search, they found a pair of men's shoes with a drop of blood on the heel, along with a roll of toilet paper with a dark red stain that resembled blood. However, the police needed a search warrant to collect evidence for further investigation, so they had to leave the apartment and go to the police station to get the necessary warrant. Meanwhile, Joshua again did not answer the phone because the police lacked concrete evidence against him. Obtaining a warrant could take some time. Police began to suspect Joshua as the prime suspect in the case. During further investigation, police learned that Joshua was 29 years old and born on February 27, 1980. Joshua's father had been murdered in the Philadelphia suburbs, and the case remained unsolved given the circumstances. Joshua may have developed mental health issues. Family friends have mentioned that he struggled after his father's death. However, the police have more troubling suspicions about him. Joshua has a lengthy criminal record that includes drug dealing, alcohol-related offenses, theft, and drunk driving. However, there are no other incidents of violence or assault in his past. On September 1, a young man named Jack Miley contacted the police. Claiming to be a friend of Joshua, he said that, on August 30, he and Joshua had gone to a bar to meet girls. Jack left the bar at around 1 a.m. with other students and woke up at around 10 a.m. He immediately smelled a strong odor of cleaning products, which made him feel nauseous. Curious about the smell, he found Joshua in the kitchen, screaming on the floor while pouring bleach. Jack noticed a deep scratch on Joshua's neck and a large cut on his arm that looked like a stab wound. Joshua explained that he fell into a thorn bush while drunk and did not remember how he injured himself. At the time, Jack had no idea where Joshua's wound had actually come from. Joshua then went to the hospital to get stitches for the cut. The two young men later met, and Joshua said he was going to North Carolina to visit relatives. This struck Jack as strange, as although he had known Joshua for a long time, he had never heard of any relatives living in another state, and this sudden trip seemed suspicious. After Joshua left, Jack learned of Jenna's disappearance. At that moment, he realized that Joshua's injuries and the blood in the house could be related to Jenna's disappearance, prompting him to go to the police due to many inconsistencies in Jack's testimony. The police began to suspect that he was involved in Jenna's disappearance. He could indeed be involved in the case because he was at the same bar as Joshua and lived with him. Jack was asked by the police to contact Joshua and find out the truth about that night. However, Joshua continued to ignore his phone calls. After a few days, Joshua's phone finally worked, and he answered. He quickly denied Jack's story, saying that he was in South Philadelphia and had not yet arrived in North Carolina. He agreed to meet the police at the station, but unfortunately, he never showed up and disappeared again. To gather more information, FBI agents joined the investigation. They monitored the general area where Joshua had spoken to the police, locating him in the mountains of northeastern Pennsylvania. This indicated that he had been dishonest about his whereabouts. All evidence pointed to him being hiding something and possibly involved in Jenna's disappearance. Joshua was eventually found at his grandmother's house, which was located near a river high in the mountains. When the police arrived to speak with Joshua, he immediately claimed that he had spoken to the police. He had spoken to the police about Jenna at the university. He then went to his grandmother's house to rest. The police knew that he was on leave and had not been to the university for a long time, which indicated that he was lying during the conversation. The police noticed a stitch on his hand and a deep scratch on his neck. As Jack had mentioned, when asked how he had been injured, Joshua said that he had been injured while breaking a cereal bowl. However, the wounds were in areas that did not match his explanation, suggesting that he was not telling the truth. The police then took Joshua and his grandmother to the police station. During the examination, the police discovered deep cuts on his hands, some of which had been stitched up. Their suspicions, combined with inconsistencies in Joshua's testimony, led them to obtain a search warrant for his room near the school. Inside, they found broken plates, including a cereal plate, but no blood on them. In other areas of Joshua's room, they found suspicious, dark red stains, especially on the kitchen sink, trash can, and kitchen knife blade. It appeared that he had tried to clean up, but failed to do so completely. In addition, the police found a black hair tie. This was just the beginning of their disturbing discoveries. They discovered a large amount of illegal drugs, suggesting that Joshua was not just a regular dealer, but a major supplier to the entire university campus. The breakthrough came when they checked a trash can and found a blood-stained sweatshirt identical to the one Jenna had worn on her last outing. Joshua was eventually arrested the same day. Police then received new information. A man contacted the police and reported that Joshua had hired him to transport a large shipment for $200 cash. The informant noticed another man helping Joshua load a heavy plastic container into the trunk of his car. During the night, they drove about 150 kilometers from the city to Joshua's grandmother's house. When they got there, the driver assisted in unloading the plastic container, which Joshua claimed contained university textbooks. This struck the driver as odd. Joshua stated that he was transporting textbooks and clothes, and that his cousin had helped transport a container. Police were then contacted by a man named George Stobo. George went into the barn to check for snakes in the corner of the barn. He discovered a plastic container, which, when opened, revealed the body of a dark-haired girl. George immediately called the police. Officers went to George's house and found Jenna's body. The body was in a terrible state, with 140 wounds that showed signs of brutal beatings. Police spoke to Joshua without revealing that they had discovered Jenna's body. He confirmed that he had moved the container to his grandmother's house, but did not admit to anything. He was nevertheless charged with murder, cruelty, and obstructing an investigation. Joshua still denies all charges against him. The medical examiner concluded that Jenna died from blunt force trauma to the head and strangulation. She had been severely beaten and repeatedly struck with a blunt object. Jenna also had a stab wound to her left hand and a deep cut to her right hand. Male bodily fluids were found on Jenna's body. Police later discovered surveillance footage that showed Jenna and Joshua entering the building, where he rented a room, at 2:32 a.m. the next day. Joshua transported her body in a plastic bin. A witness reported hearing Jenna screaming from Joshua's room. These screams of pain lasted for several minutes before suddenly stopping, but no one called for help or intervened. The question is why Jack, who lived next door, did not hear the screams. Was he an accomplice to the crime, or was he too drunk to realize what had happened? The exact truth remains unclear, as Jack claims he was drunk and did not hear anything. Regardless, there is no evidence implicating him in the murder. The trial began in 2019. At this time, forensic experts thoroughly examined Jenna's body and confirmed that there were male fluids on her body, indicating that she had been abused. However, Joshua claimed that their interaction was consensual. Joshua's lawyer insisted that Jack was the real culprit. However, Jack's sister testified, saying that her brother was completely unaware of the incident because he fell asleep after drinking, making it impossible for anyone to wake him up during the trial. Joshua changed his plea and admitted that he was involved in the desecration of the body, but he maintained his innocence of the murder. After deliberations, the jury found Joshua guilty of murder and related charges. He was sentenced to life without parole, plus an additional 18 years for concealing evidence. His lawyer quickly sought to appeal the sentence. arguing that police did not have the necessary warrant when they first searched Joshua's room. However, the appeal was rejected,